First prefatory discussion. Human one's social organization is something necessary. The philosophers expressed this fact by saying, man is political by nature. 2. That is, he cannot do without the social organization for which the philosophers use the technical term town, polis. This is what civilization means. The necessary character of human social organization or civilization is explained by the fact that God created and fashioned man in a form that can live and subsist only with the help of food. He guided man to a natural desire for food and instilled in him the power that enables him to obtain it. However, the power of the individual human being is not sufficient for him to obtain the food he needs, and does not provide him with as much food as he requires to live. Even if we assume an absolute minimum of food, that is, food enough for one day, a little wheat, for instance, that amount of food could be obtained only after much preparation such as grinding, kneading, and baking. Each of these 3 operations requires utensils and tools that can be provided only with the help of several crafts, such as the crafts of the blacksmith, the carpenter, and the potter. Assuming that a man could eat unprepared grain, an even greater number of operations would be necessary in order to obtain the grain, sowing and reaping, and threshing to separate it from the husks of the ear. Each of these operations requires a number of tools and many more crafts than those just mentioned. It is beyond the power of one man alone to do all that, or, even, part of it, by himself. Thus, he cannot do without a combination of many powers from among his fellow beings, if he is to obtain food for himself and for them. Through cooperation, the needs of a number of persons, many times greater than their own number, can be satisfied. Likewise, each individual needs the help of his fellow beings for his defense, as well. When God fashioned the natures of all living beings and divided the various powers among them, many dumb animals were given more perfect powers than God gave to man. The power of a horse, for instance, is much greater than the power of man, and so is the power of a donkey or an ox. The power of a lion or an elephant is many times greater than the power of man. Aggressiveness is natural in living beings. Therefore, God gave each of them a special limb for defense against aggression. To man, instead, he gave the ability to think, and the hand. With the help of the ability to think, the hand is able to prepare the ground for the crafts. The crafts, in turn, procure for man the instruments that serve him instead of limbs, which other animals possess for their defense. Lances, for instance, take the place of horns for goring, swords the place of claws to inflict wounds, shields the place of thick skins, and so on. There are other such things. They were all mentioned by Gale in De Usu Partium 3. The power of one individual human being cannot withstand the power of any one dumb animal, especially not the power of the predatory animals. Man is generally unable to defend himself against them by himself. Nor is his, unaided, power sufficient to make use of the existing instruments of defense, because there are so many of them and they require so many crafts and additional things. It is absolutely necessary for man to have the cooperation of his fellow men. As long as there is no such cooperation, he cannot obtain any food or nourishment, and life cannot materialize for him, because God fashioned him so that he must have food if he is to live. Nor, lacking weapons, can he defend himself. Thus, he falls prey to animals and dies much before his time. Under such circumstances, the human species would vanish. When, however, mutual cooperation exists, man obtains food for his nourishment and weapons for his defense. God's wise plan that man, kind, should subsist and the human species be preserved will be fulfilled. Consequently, social organization is necessary to the human species. Without it, the existence of human beings would be incomplete. God's desire to settle the world with human beings and to leave them as his representatives on earth would not materialize. This is the meaning of civilization, the object of the science under discussion. The aforementioned remarks have been in the nature of establishing the existence of the object in this particular field. A scholar in a particular discipline is not obliged to do this, since it is accepted in logic that a scholar in a particular science does not have to establish the existence of the object in that science. 5. On the other hand, logicians do not consider it forbidden to do so. Thus, it is a voluntary contribution. God, in his grace, gives success. When mankind has achieved social organization, as we have stated, and when civilization in the world has thus become a fact, people need someone to exercise a restraining influence and keep them apart, for aggressiveness and injustice are in the animal nature of man. The weapons made for the defense of human beings against the aggressiveness of dumb animals do not suffice against the aggressiveness of man to man, because all of them possess those weapons. Thus, something else is needed for defense against the aggressiveness of human beings toward each other. It could not come from outside, because all the other animals fall short of human perceptions and inspiration. The person who exercises a restraining influence, therefore, must be one of themselves. He must dominate them and have power and authority over them, so that no one of them will be able to attack another. This is the meaning of royal authority. It has thus become clear that royal authority is a natural quality of man which is absolutely necessary to mankind. The philosophers mention that it also exists among certain dumb animals, such as the bees and the locusts. 7. One discerns among them the existence of authority and obedience to a leader. They follow the one of them who is distinguished as their leader by his natural characteristics and body. However, outside of human beings, these things exist as the result of natural disposition and divine guidance, and not as the result of an ability to think or to administrate. He gave everything its natural characteristics, and then guided it. 8. The philosophers go further. They attempt to give logical proof of the existence of prophecy and to show that prophecy is a natural quality of man. In this connection, they carry the argument to its ultimate consequences and say that human beings absolutely require some authority to exercise a restraining influence. They go on to say that such restraining influence exists through the religious law that has been ordained by God and revealed to mankind by a human being. This human being is distinguished from the rest of mankind by special qualities of divine guidance that God gave him, in order that he might find the others submissive to him and ready to accept what he says. Eventually, the existence of a restraining authority among them and over them becomes a fact that is accepted without the slightest disapproval or dissent. This proposition of the philosophers is not logical, as one can see. Existence and human life can materialize without the existence of prophecy. Through injunctions a person in authority may devise on his own or with the help of a group feeling that enables him to force the others to follow him wherever he wants to go. People who have a divinely revealed book and who follow the prophets are few in number in comparison with all the Magians 9 who have no divinely revealed book. The latter constitute the majority of the world's inhabitants. Still, they, too, have possessed dynasties and monuments, not to mention life itself. They still possess these things at this time in the intemperate zones to the north and the south. This is in contrast 10 with human life in the state of anarchy, with no one to exercise a restraining influence. That would be impossible. This shows that the philosophers are wrong when they assume that prophecy exists by necessity. The existence of prophecy is not required by logic. Its necessary character is indicated by the religious law, as was the belief of the early Muslims. God gives success and guidance. Second prefatory discussion. The parts of the earth where civilization is found. Some information about oceans, rivers, and zones. 11. In 12 the books of philosophers who speculated about the condition of the world, it has been explained that the earth has a spherical shape and is enveloped by the element of water. It may be compared to a grape floating upon water. 13. The water withdrew from certain parts of the earth, because God wanted to create living beings upon it and settle it with the human species that rules as God's representative over all other beings. 14. One might from this get the impression that the water is below the earth. This is not correct. The natural below of the earth is the core and middle of its sphere, the center to which everything is attracted by its gravity. All the sides of the earth beyond that and the water surrounding the earth are above. When some part of the earth is said to be below, it is said to be so with reference to some other region of the earth. The part of the earth from which the water has withdrawn is 1/2 the surface of the sphere of the earth. It has a circular form and is surrounded on all sides by the element of water which forms a sea called the surrounding sea, al-Bahr al-Muhit. It is also called Lablaya, 15 with thickening of the second L, or Oseos 16. Both are non-Arabic words. It is also called the Green Sea and the Black Sea. The part of the earth that is free from water, and thus suitable for human civilization, has more waste and empty areas than cultivated, habitable areas. The empty area in the south is larger than that in the north. The cultivated part of the earth extends more toward the north. In the shape of a circular plane it extends in the south to the equator and in the north to a circular 17 line, behind which there are mountains separating the cultivated part of the earth from the elemental water. Enclosed between these mountains is the dam of Gog and Magog. These mountains extend toward the east. In the east and the west, they also reach the elemental water, at 2 sections, points, of the circular line that surrounds the cultivated part of the earth. The part of the earth that is free from water is said to cover 1/2 or less of the sphere of the earth. The cultivated part covers 1/4 of it. It is divided into 7 zones. 18. The equator divides the earth into 2 halves from west to east. It represents the length of the earth. It is the longest line on the sphere of the earth, just as the ecliptic and the equinoctial line are the longest lines on the firmament. The ecliptic is divided into 360 degrees. The geographical degree is 25 parasangs, the parasang being 12,000 cubits or 3 miles, since 1 mile has 4,000 cubits. The cubit is 24 fingers, and the finger is 6 grains of barley placed closely together in 1 row. 19. The distance of the equinoctial line, parallel to the equator of the earth and dividing the firmament into 2 parts, is 90 degrees from each of the 2 poles. However, the cultivated area north of the equator is only 64 degrees 20. The rest is empty and uncultivated because of the bitter cold and frost, exactly as the southern part is altogether empty because of the heat. We shall explain it all, if God wills. Information about the cultivated part and its boundaries and about the cities, towns, mountains, rivers, waste areas, and sandy deserts it contains, has been given by men such as Ptolemy in the Geography 21 and, after him, by the author of the Book of Roger 22. These men divided the cultivated area into 7 parts which they called the 7 zones. The borders of the 7 zones are imaginary. They extend from east to west. In width, latitudinal extension, they are identical. In length, longitudinal extension, different. The first zone is longer than the second. The same applies to the second zone, and so on. The 7th zone is the shortest. This is required by the circular shape that resulted from the withdrawal of the water from the sphere of the Earth. According to these scholars, each of the 7 zones is divided from west to east into 10 contiguous sections. Information about general conditions and civilization is given for each section. The geographers mentioned that the Mediterranean, which we all know, branches off from the surrounding sea in the western part of the 4th zone. It begins at a narrow straits about 12 miles wide between Tangier and Tarifa, called the Strait of Gibraltar. It then extends eastward and opens out to a width of 600 miles. It terminates at the end of the 4th section of the 4th zone, a distance of 1,160 parasangs from its starting point. There, it is bordered by the coast of Syria. On the south, it is bordered by the coast of the Maghreb, beginning with Tangier at the Straits, then El Frigia, Barqua, and Alexandria. On the north, it is bordered by the coast of Costaciopole, then Venice, Rome, France, and Spain, back to Tarifa at the Strait of Gibraltar, opposite Tangier. The Mediterranean is also called the Roman Sea or the Syrian Sea. It contains many populous islands. Some of them are large, such as Crete, Cyprus, Sicily, Majorca, and Sardinia. 23 in the north, they say, 2 other seas branch off from the Mediterranean through 2 straits. One of them is opposite Costaciopole. It starts at the Mediterranean in a narrow straits, only an arrow shot in width. It flows for a 3 days run and touches Costaciopole. Then, it attains a width of 4 miles. It flows in this channel for 60 miles, where it is known as the Straits of Costaciopole. Through a mouth 6 miles wide, it then flows into the Black Sea, 24, and becomes a sea that, from there, turns eastward in its course. It passes the land of Heraclea, in Bythera, 25, and ends at the country of the Khazars, 1,300 miles from its mouth. Along its 2 coasts live the Byzantine, the Turkish, the Bulgar, Burji, 26, and the Russian nations. The second sea that branches off from the 2 straits of the Mediterranean is the Adriatic Sea, Gulf of Venice. It emerges from Byzantine territory at its northern limit. Then, from Sant'Angelo di Lombardy, its western boundary extends from the country of the Venetians to the territory of Aquileia, 1,100 miles from where it started. On its 2 shores live the Venetians, the Byzantines, Rum, and other nations. It is called the Gulf of Venice, Adriatic Sea. From the surrounding sea, they say, a large and wide sea flows on the east at 13 degrees north of the equator. It flows a little toward the south, entering the 1st zone. Then it flows west within the 1st zone until it reaches the country of the Abyssinians and the Negroes, the Zaj, 27, and Bib al-Madeb in the 5th section of the 1st zone, 4,500 parasangs from its starting point. This sea is called the Chinese, Indian, or Abyssinian Sea, Indian Ocean. It is bordered on the south by the country of the Negroes, Zaj, and the country of Berbera, which Imru al-Qais mentioned in his poem 28. These Berbers do not belong to the Berbers who make up the tribes in the Maghreb. The sea is then bordered by the area of Mogadishu, Sufila, and the land of Alwigwiku, 29, and by other nations beyond which there is nothing but waste and empty areas. On the north, where it starts, it is bordered by China, then by eastern and western India, Al-Hind and As-Sid, and then by the coast of the Yemen, that is, Al-Arqif, Zabid, and other cities. Where it ends, it is bordered by the country of the Negroes, and, beyond them, the Baja 30. Two other seas, they say, branch off from the Indian Ocean. One of them branches off where the Indian Ocean ends, at Bab al-Mandeb. It starts out narrow, then flows widening toward the north and slightly to the west until it ends at the city of Al-Kultum in the fifth section of the second zone, 1,400 miles from its starting point. This is the Sea of Al-Kultum or Sea of Suez, Red Sea. From the Red Sea at Suez to Fustat 31 is the distance of a 3 days' journey. The Red Sea is bordered on the east by the coast of the Yemen, the Hijaz, and Jeddah, 32, and then, where it ends, by Media, Ayla, and Farah 33 on the west. It is bordered by the coast of Upper Egypt, Adab, Swaki, and Zillah, and then, where it begins, by the country of the Baja. It ends at Al-Kultum. It would reach the Mediterranean at Al-Arish. The distance between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean is a 6 days' journey. Many rulers, both Muslim and pre-Islamic, have wanted to cut through the intervening territory with a canal, but this has not been achieved. The second sea branching off from the Indian Ocean and called the Persian Gulf, the Green Gulf, branches off at the region between the west coast of India and Al-Arqif in the Yemen. It flows toward the north and slightly to the west until it ends at Al-Ubala on the coast of Al-Basra in the sixth section of the second zone, 440 parasangs from its starting point. It is called the Persian Gulf, Persian Sea. It is bordered on the east by the coast of western India, Mukri, Kumi, Fuz, and Al-Ubala where it ends. On the west, it is bordered by the coast of Al-Bahrain, the Yamamor, Oman, Ashshi, and Al-Arqif where it starts. Between the Persian Gulf and Al-Kultum lies the Arabian Peninsula, jutting out from the mainland into the sea. It is surrounded by the Indian Ocean to the south, by the Red Sea to the west, and by the Persian Gulf to the east. It adjoins the Iraq in the region between Syria and Al-Basra, where the distance between Syria and the Iraq is 1,500 miles. In the Iraq are Al-Kufa, Al-Qudistiyah, Baghdad, the reception hall of Khosrow, at Qtazifah, 34 and Al-Hira. Beyond that live non-Arab nations such as the Turks, the Khazars, and others. The Arabian Peninsula comprises the Hijaz in the west, the Yamamor, Al-Bahrain, and Oman in the east, and in the south the Yemen along the coast of the Indian Ocean. In the cultivated area of the earth, they say, there is another sea to the north in the land of the Dalim. This sea has no connection with the other seas. It is called the Sea of Jawa and Tabarista, Caspian Sea. Its length is 1,000 miles, and its width 600. To the west of it lies Azerbaijan and the Dalim territory, to the east of it the land of the Turks and Khwarizm, to the south of it Tabarista, and to the north of it the land of the Khazars and the Alas. These are all the famous seas mentioned by the geographers. They further say that in the cultivated part of the earth, there are many rivers. The largest among them are 4 in number, namely, the Nile, the Euphrates, the Tigris, and the river of Balkh which is called Oxus, Jehu. The Nile begins at a large mountain, 16 degrees beyond the equator at the boundary of the fourth section of the first zone. This mountain is called the Mountain of the Qamar 35. No higher mountain is known on earth. Many springs issue from the mountain, some of them flowing into one lake there, and some of them into another lake. From these 2 lakes, several rivers branch off, and all of them flow into a lake at the equator, which is at the distance of a 10 days' journey from the mountain. From that lake, 2 rivers issue. One of them flows due north, passing through the country of the Ubar and then through Egypt. Having traversed Egypt, it divides into many branches lying close to each other. Each of these is called a channel. All flow into the Mediterranean at Alexandria. This river is called the Egyptian Nile. It is bordered by Upper Egypt on the east, and by the oases on the west. The other river turns westward, flowing due west until it flows into the surrounding sea. This river is the Sudanese Nile. 36 All the Negro nations live along its borders. The Euphrates begins in Armenia in the 6th section of the 5th zone. It flows south through Byzantine territory, Antalya, past Malatia to Mabij, and then passes Sifli, Araga, and Al-Kufa until it reaches the marsh, Al-Baitha, between Al-Basra and Wasit. From there it flows into the Indian Ocean. Many rivers flow into it along its course. Other rivers branch off from it and flow into the Tigris. The Tigris originates in a number of springs in the country of Kilat, which is also in Armenia. It passes on its course southward through Mosul, Azerbaijan, and Baghdad to Wasit. There, it divides into several channels, all of which flow into the Lake of Al-Basra and join the Persian Gulf. The Tigris flows east of the Euphrates. Many large rivers flow into it from all sides. The region between the Euphrates and the Tigris, where it is first formed, is the Jazira of Mosul, facing Syria on both banks of the Euphrates, and facing Azerbaijan on both banks of the Tigris. The Oxus originates at Balkh, in the 8th section of the 3rd zone, in a great number of springs there. Large rivers flow into it, as it follows a course from south to north. It flows through Curasa, then past Curasa to Khawarizm in the 8th section of the 5th zone. It flows into Lake Aral, the Lake of Gergach, which is situated at the foot, north, of the city of Gergach. In length as in width, it extends the distance of 1 month's journey. The river of Farghar and Tashkent, Ashshash, 37, which comes from the territory of the Turks, flows into it. West of the Oxus lie Curasa and Khawarizm. East of it lie the cities of Bukhari, At-Tamid, and Samarkand. Beyond that are the country of the Turks, Farghar, the Karluk, 38, and other, non-Arab nations. All this was mentioned by Ptolemy in his work and by the Sharaf, al-Idrisi, in the Book of Roger. All the mountains, seas, and rivers to be found in the cultivated part of the earth are depicted on maps and exhaustively treated in geography. We do not have to go any further into it. It is too lengthy a subject, and our main concern is with the Maghrib, the home of the Berbers, and the Arab home countries in the east. God gives success. Supplementary note to the second prefatory discussion. The northern quarter of the earth has more civilization than the southern quarter. The reason thereof. We know from observation and from continuous tradition that the first and the second of the cultivated zones have less civilization than the other zones. The cultivated area in the first and second zones is interspersed with empty waste areas and sandy deserts and has the Indian Ocean to the east. The nations and populations of the first and second zones are not excessively numerous. The same applies to the cities and towns there. The third, fourth, and subsequent zones are just the opposite. Waste areas there are few. Sandy deserts also are few or non-existent. The nations and populations are tremendous. Cities and towns are exceedingly numerous. Civilization has its seat between the third and the sixth zones. The south is all emptiness. Many philosophers have mentioned that this is because of the excessive heat and slightness of the sun's deviation from the zenith in the south. Let us explain and prove this statement. The result will clarify the reason why civilization in the third and fourth zones is so highly developed and extends also to the fifth, sixth, and seventh zones. We say, when the south and north poles of heaven are upon the horizon, they constitute a large circle that divides the firmament into two parts. It is the largest circle in it, and runs from west to east. It is called the equinoctial line. In astronomy, it has been explained in the proper place that the highest sphere moves from east to west in a daily motion by means of which it also forces the spheres enclosed by it to move. This motion is perceptible to the senses. It has also been explained that the stars in their spheres have a motion that is contrary to this motion and is, therefore, a motion from west to east. The periods of this movement differ according to the different speeds of the motions of the stars. Parallel to the courses of all these stars in their spheres, there runs a large circle which belongs to the highest sphere and divides it into two halves. This is the ecliptic zodiac. It is divided into 12 signs. As has been explained in the proper place, the equinoctial line intersects the ecliptic at two opposite points, namely, at the beginning of Aries and at the beginning of Libra. The equinoctial line divides the zodiac into two halves. One of them extends northward from the equinoctial line and includes the signs from the beginning of Aries to the end of Virgo. The other half extends southward from it and includes the signs from the beginning of Libra to the end of Pisces. When the two poles fall upon the horizon, which takes place in one particular region, among all the regions of the Earth, a line is formed upon the surface of the Earth that faces the equinoctial line and runs from west to east. This line is called the equator. According to astronomical observation, this line is believed to coincide with the beginning of the first of the 7 zones. All civilization is to the north of it. The North Pole gradually ascends on the horizon of the cultivated area of the Earth, until its elevation reaches 64 degrees. Here, all civilization ends. This is the end of the 7th zone. When its elevation reaches 90 degrees on the horizon, that is the distance between the pole and the equinoctial line, then it is at its zenith, and the equinoctial line is on the horizon. 6 of the signs of the zodiac, the northern ones, remain above the horizon, and 6, the southern ones, are below it. Civilization is impossible in the area between the 64th and the 90th degrees, for no admixture of heat and cold occurs there because of the great time interval between them. Generation of anything, therefore, does not take place. The sun is at its zenith on the equator at the beginning of Aries and Libra. It then declines from its zenith down to the beginning of Cancer and Capricorn. Its greatest declination from the equinoctial line is 24 degrees. Now, when the North Pole ascends on the horizon, the equinoctial line declines from the zenith in proportion to the elevation of the North Pole, and the South Pole descends correspondingly. As regards the 3 distances constituting geographical latitude, 39 scholars who calculate the prayer times call this the latitude of a place. When the equinoctial line declines from the zenith, the northern signs of the zodiac gradually rise above it, proportionately to its rise, until the beginning of Cancer is reached. Meanwhile, the southern signs of the zodiac correspondingly descend below the horizon until the beginning of Capricorn is reached, because of the inclination of the 2 halves of the zodiac, upwards or downwards from the horizon of the equator, as we have stated. The northern horizon continues to rise, until its northern limit, which is the beginning of Cancer, is in the zenith. This is where the latitude is 24 degrees in the Hijaz and the territory adjacent. This is the declination from the equinoctial at the horizon of the equator at the beginning of Cancer. With the elevation of the North Pole, Cancer rises until it attains the zenith. When the pole rises more than 24 degrees, the Sun descends from the zenith and continues to do so until the elevation of the pole is 64 degrees, and the Sun's descent from the zenith, as well as the depression of the South Pole under the horizon, is the same distance. Then, generation of anything stops because of the excessive cold and frost and the long time without any heat. At and nearing its zenith, the Sun sends its rays down upon the Earth at right angles. In other positions, it sends them down at obtuse or acute angles. When the rays form right angles, the light is strong and spreads out over a wide area, in contrast to what happens in the case of obtuse and acute angles. Therefore, at and nearing its zenith, the heat is greater than in other positions, because the light of the Sun is the reason for heat and calefaction. The Sun reaches its zenith at the equator twice a year in 2 points of Aries and Libra. No declination of the Sun goes very far. The heat hardly begins to become more temperate when the Sun has reached the limit of its declination at the beginning of Cancer or Capricorn and begins to rise again toward the zenith. The perpendicular rays then fall heavily upon the horizon there, in these regions, and hold steady for a long time, if not permanently. The air gets burning hot, even excessively so. The same is true whenever the Sun reaches the zenith in the area between the equator and latitude 24 degrees, as it does twice a year. The rays exercise almost as much force upon the horizon there, at this latitude, as they do at the equator. The excessive heat causes a parching dryness in the air that prevents any generation. As the heat becomes more excessive, water and all kinds of moisture dry up, and the power of generation is destroyed in minerals, plants, and animals, because all generation depends on moisture. Now, when the beginning of Cancer declines from the zenith at the latitude of 25 degrees and beyond, the Sun also declines from its zenith. The heat becomes temperate, or deviates only slightly from being temperate. Then, generation can take place. This goes on until the cold becomes excessive, due to the lack of light and the obtuse angles of the rays of the Sun. Then, the power of generation again decreases and is destroyed. However, the destruction caused by great heat is greater than that caused by great cold, because heat brings about desiccation faster than cold brings about freezing. Therefore, there is little civilization in the first and second zones. There is a medium degree of civilization in the third, fourth, and fifth zones, because the heat there is temperate owing to the decreased amount of light. There is a great deal of civilization in the sixth and seventh zones because of the decreased amount of heat there. At first, cold does not have the same destructive effect upon the power of generation as heat. It causes desiccation only when it becomes excessive and thus has dryness added. This is the case beyond the seventh zone. All this, then, is the reason why civilization is stronger and more abundant in the northern quarter. And God knows better. The 40 philosophers concluded from these facts that the region at the equator and beyond it, to the south, was empty. On the strength of observation and continuous tradition, it was argued against them that, to the contrary, it was cultivated. How would it be possible to prove this contention? It is obvious that the philosophers did not mean to deny entirely the existence of civilization there, but their argumentation led them to the realizatio that the power of generation must, to a large degree, be destroyed there because of the excessive heat. Consequently, civilization there would be either impossible, or only minimally possible. This is so. The region at the equator and beyond it, to the south, even if it has civilization as has been reported, has only a very little of it. Averroes 41 assumed that the equator is in a symmetrical position 42 and that what is beyond the equator to the south corresponds to what is beyond it to the north. Consequently, as much of the south would be cultivated as of the north. His assumption is not impossible, so far as the argument of the destruction of the power of generation is concerned. However, as to the region south of the equator, it is made impossible by the fact that the element of water covers the face of the earth in the south, where the corresponding area in the north admits of generation. On account of the greater amount of water in the south, Averroes' assumption of the symmetrical position of the equator thus turns out to be impossible. Everything else follows, since civilization progresses gradually and begins its gradual progress where it can exist, not where it cannot exist. The assumption that civilization cannot exist at the equator is contradicted by continuous tradition. And God knows better. After this discussion, we wish to draw a map of the earth, 43 as was done by the author of the Book of Roger. Then, we shall give a detailed description of the map. Detailed description of the map 44. This descript law is twofold. There is a detailed description and a general description. The detailed description consists of a discussion of each country, mountain, sea, and river of the cultivated part of the earth. This discussion will be found in the following section. The general description consists of a discussion of the division of the cultivated part of the earth into 7 zones, their latitudinal extension, and the length of their days. Such is the contents of this section. Let us begin to explain these things. We have mentioned before that the earth floats upon the elemental water like a grape. 45 God's plan for civilization and for the elemental generation of life resulted in making part of the earth free of water. The part that is free of water is said to constitute 1/2 the surface of the earth. The cultivated part is 1/4 of it. The rest is uncultivated. According to another opinion, the cultivated part is only 1/6 of it. The empty areas of the part which is free of water lie to the south and to the north. The cultivated area in between forms a continuum that stretches from west to east. There is no empty area between the cultivated part and the surrounding sea in these 2 directions. They further said, across the cultivated part of the earth an imaginary line runs from west to east facing the equinoctial line of the firmament, in regions where the 2 poles of the firmament are on the horizon. At this line civilization begins. It extends from there northwards. Ptolemy said, as a matter of fact, civilization extends beyond that line to the south. He indicated the latitudinal extension, as will be mentioned 46. Ishaq B. Al-Hasan al-Qajai 47 expresses the opinion that beyond the 7th zone, to the north, there is another civilization. He indicated its latitudinal extension, as we shall. Key to the map. 1 south 41 Mukri. 2 west 42 Kumi. 3 north 43 Fuz. 4 east 44 Albalas. 5 empty beyond the equator because 45 Azerbaijan of the heat. 6 equator 46 desert. 7 Lamlam country 47 Kurasai. 8 Maghazawa. 48 Kuwairism. 9 Kim, country 49 Eastern India. 10 Boru 50 Tashkent. 11 Gaygor 51 Sogd. 12 Zagi 52 China. 13 At-Tijawi 53 Tuguz Huz. 14 Euboea 54 Gascogne, 15 Abisua 55 Brittany, 16 Car 56 Calabrier, 17 Lamtar 57 France, 18 Azzouz 58 Venice, 19 Morocco 59 Germany, Alamiya, 20 Tangier 60 Macedonia, 21 Sahija 61 Bohemia, 22 Dar 62 Jathulia, 23 Ifriqiya 63 Jamaiya, 24 Fezar 64 Albaylaji, 25 Jared 65 Armenia, 26 Khoi 66 Tabarista, 27 Desert of Birai 67 Alas, 28 Inner Oases 68 Bashkirs, 29 Upper Egypt 69 Bulgars, 30 Egypt 70 Pechegs, 31 Baja 71 Stinking Land, 32 Hijaz 72 Waste Country, 33 Syria 73 Magog, 34 Yemen 74 Guz, 35 Yamimor 75 Diajish, 36 Al-Basra 76 Adkish, 37 Iraq 77 Kalak, 38 Ashshi 78 Gog, 39 Oman 79 Kimik, 40 Western India 80 empty in the north because of the cold. Mention 48 Al-Qajai is one of the leading scholars in this craft, geography. Asterisk further, the ancient philosophers divided the cultivated part of the earth in the north into 7 zones by means of imaginary lines running from west to east. They maintain that these zones have different latitudinal extensions. This will be discussed in detail. The first zone runs along the equator, north of it. South of it, there is only the civilization to which reference was made by Ptolemy. Beyond that are waste regions and sandy deserts, up to the circle of water which is called the surrounding sea. To the north, the first zone is followed, successively, by the second through the 7th zones. The 7th zone constitutes the northern limit of civilization. Beyond it are only empty and waste regions, down to the surrounding sea as, in the south. However, the empty regions in the south are much larger than those in the north. Asterisk. As to latitudes and length of days in the various zones, it should be known that the 2 poles of the firmament are upon the horizon at the equator in the west and the east. It should be known that, as was mentioned above, the philosophers divided the cultivated part of the earth into 7 parts from south to north. These parts they called zones. The whole of the cultivated area is distributed over these zones. Each zone extends from west to east. The first zone runs from west to east with the equator as its southern border. Beyond it, there are only waste regions and sandy deserts, and civilization of a sort that, if it actually exists, is more like non-civilization. To the north, the first zone is followed, successively, by the 2nd through the 7th zones. The 7th zone constitutes the northern limit of civilization. Beyond it, to the north, are only empty and waste regions until the surrounding sea is reached. The situation is the same here as it is beyond the first zone to the south. However, the empty areas in the north are much smaller than those in the south. The sun there is at the zenith. As we follow the cultivated part of the earth farther and farther north, the North Pole ascends slightly, and the South Pole descends correspondingly, at the horizon. Furthermore, the sun moves a corresponding distance from its zenith at the equinoctial line. These 3 distances are equal to each other. Each of them is called geographical latitude. This is well known to the scholars who determine the prayer times. People hold different opinions as to the latitudinal extension of the cultivated part of the earth, and as to the latitudinal extension, breadth, of the various zones. Ptolemy holds the opinion that the latitudinal extension of the entire cultivated part of the earth is 771/2. The latitudinal extension of the cultivated part beyond the equator to the south is 11 degrees 48. Thus, the latitudinal extension of the zones in the north is 661/2. According to him, the first zone extends to 16 degrees, 48°, the second to 20 degrees, the third to 27 degrees, the fourth to 33 degrees, the fifth to 38 degrees, the sixth to 43 degrees, the seventh to 48 degrees 49. He then determined the degree on the firmament as having a length of 662/3 miles. Were it to be measured on the surface of the earth 50, thus, the first zone from south to north is 1067 miles wide, the second zone, 2333 miles, the third zone, 2790 miles, the fourth zone, 2185 miles, the fifth zone, 520 miles, the sixth zone, 2840 miles, and the seventh zone, 150 miles. The length of night and day differs in the various zones by reason of the declination of the sun from the equinoctial line and the elevation of the North Pole above the horizon. This causes a difference in the arcs of day and night. The length of night and day differs in the different zones by reason of the declination of the sun from the equinoctial line and the elevation of the North Pole above the horizon. This causes a difference in the arcs of day and night. At the boundary of the first zone, the longest night which occurs when the sun enters Capricorn and the longest day which occurs when the sun enters Cancer reach a maximum of 13 hours. The same is the case at the boundary of the second zone in the north. The length of day there reaches its maximum of 13½ hours when the sun enters Cancer, the summer tropic. The longest night when the sun enters Capricorn, the winter tropic, is as long. For the shortest day and night, there thus remains the difference between 13½ and 24, which is the combined number of hours of day and night, or one complete revolution of the firmament. The same is the case also at the boundary of the third zone in the north, where night and day reach a maximum length of 14 hours, at the boundary of the fourth zone, where they reach a maximum length of 14½ hours, at the boundary of the fifth zone, where they reach a maximum length of 15 hours, at the boundary of the sixth zone, where they reach a maximum length of 15½ hours, and at the boundary of the seventh zone, where they reach a maximum length of 16 hours. There, civilization ends. The difference in the maximum length of night and day in the various zones, consequently, is an evenly distributed, gradual increase of half an hour in each, all the way from the first zone in the south to the last zone in the north. In connection with these zones, geographical latitude refers to the distance between the sun at its zenith in a given place and the equinoctial line where it is at the zenith on the equator. It likewise corresponds to the depression of the South Pole below the horizon in that particular place, as well as to the elevation of the North Pole. As was mentioned before, 51 these three distances are equal to each other. They are called geographical latitude. At the boundary of the first zone, the longest night which occurs when the sun enters Capricorn, and the longest day which occurs when the sun enters Cancer reach, according to Ptolemy, a maximum of 12½ hours, at the boundary of the second zone. A maximum of 13 hours, at the boundary of the third zone, a maximum of 13½ hours, at the boundary of the fourth zone, a maximum of 14 hours, at the boundary of the fifth zone, a maximum of 1/2 hour more, at the boundary of the 6th zone. A maximum of 15 hours, and at the boundary of the 7th zone, a maximum of 1/2 hour more. For the shortest day and night, there thus remains the difference between the last figure and 24, which is the combined number of hours of day and night, or one complete revolution of the firmament. The difference in the maximum length of night and day in the various zones, consequently, is an evenly distributed, gradual increase of half an hour in each, all the way from the first zone in the south to the last zone in the north. Asterisk. Ishaq B. Al-Hasan al-Khaja'i maintains that the latitudinal extension of civilization beyond the equator, to the south, is 16 degrees 25, and the longest night and day there, 13 hours. The latitudinal extension of the first zone and the length of day and night there are the same as beyond the equator, to the south. The second zone extends to 24 degrees, 51 and the length of its longest day and night at its farthest point is 13 1/2 hours. For the third zone, the figures are 30 degrees and 14 hours. For the fourth zone, they are 36 degrees and 14 1/2 hours. For the fifth zone, they are 41 degrees and 15 hours. For the sixth zone, they are 45 degrees and 15 1/2 hours. For the seventh zone, they are 481/2 degrees and 16 hours. The latitudinal extension of civilization beyond the seventh zone, to the north, reaches from the boundary of the 7th zone to latitude 63 degrees, and the length of the longest day and night to 20 hours. Other leading scholars in the discipline, apart from Ishaq al-Khaja'i, maintain that the latitudinal extension of the cultivated area beyond the equator, to the south, is 16 degrees 27. The first zone extends to 20 degrees 15. The second to 27 degrees 13, the third to 33 degrees 20, the fourth to 381/2 degrees 52, the fifth to 43 degrees, the sixth to 47 degrees 53, or, according to another opinion, to 46 degrees 50, and the seventh to 51 degrees 53. Civilization beyond the 7th zone extends to 77 degrees. In Abu Ja'far al-Khaja'i, 53, one of the leading scholars in the discipline, one also finds that the latitudinal extension of the first zone is from 1 degree to 20 degrees 13, of the second, to 27 degrees 13, of the third, to 33 degrees 39, of the fourth, to 38 degrees 23, of the fifth, to 42 degrees 58, of the sixth, to 47 degrees 2, and of the seventh, to 60 degrees 45-54. This is as much as I know about the different opinions concerning latitudinal extension and length of day and night in the zones and concerning their width as indicated in miles. God created everything. Then, he determined it. 55. The geographers have subdivided each of the 7 zones lengthwise from west to east in 10 equal sections. They mention the countries, cities, mountains, and rivers of each section, and the traveling distances between them. We shall now briefly summarize the best-known countries, rivers, and seas of each section. Our model will be the data set forth in the Asat al-Mushtaq which al-Alwi al-56. Idrisi al-Hamudi composed for the Christian king of Sicily, Roger, the son of Roger. Al-Idrisi's family had given up its rule of Malaga, and he had settled at Roger's court in Sicily. He composed the book in the middle of the 6th, 12th century. He utilized many books by authors such as al-Marzudi, Ibn Dadbi, al-Horgali, al-Udri, Ishaq al-Mujim, 57 Ptolemy and others. We shall begin with the first zone and go on from there to the last one. The first zone. The Eternal Islands, the Canaries, from which Ptolemy began the determination of geographical longitude, are in the west. They are not part of the land mass of the first zone. They lie in the surrounding sea. A number of islands constitute them. The largest and best known are 3 in number. They are said to be cultivated. We have heard 58 that European Christian ships reached them in the middle of this century, fought with the inhabitants, plundered them, captured some of them, and sold some of the captives along the Moroccan coast where they came into the service of the ruler. After they had learned Arabic, they gave information about conditions on their island. They said that they tilled the soil with horns. Iron was lacking in their country. Their bread 59 was made of barley. Their animals were goats. They fought with stones, which they hurled backwards. Their worship consisted of prostrations before the rising sun. They knew no revealed religion and had not been reached by any missionary activity. These islands can be reached only by chance, and not intentionally by navigation. Navigation on the sea depends on the winds. It depends on knowledge of the directions the winds blow from and where they lead, and on following a straight course from the places that lie along the path of a particular wind. When the wind changes and it is known where a straight course along it will lead, the sails are set for it, and the ship thus sails according to nautical norms evolved by the mariners and sailors 60 who are in charge of sea voyages. The countries situated on the 2 shores of the Mediterranean are noted on a chart, Sahifa, which indicates the true facts regarding them and gives their positions along the coast in the proper order. The various winds and their paths are likewise put down on the chart. This chart is called the compass. 61 fit it is on this compass that sailors rely on their voyages. Nothing of the sort exists for the surrounding sea. Therefore, ships do not enter it, because, were they to lose sight of shore, they would hardly be able to find their way back to it. Moreover, the air of the surrounding sea and its surface harbors vapors that hamper ships on their courses. Because of the remoteness of these vapors, the rays of the sun which the surface of the earth deflects, cannot reach and dissolve them. It is, therefore, difficult to find the way to the Eternal Islands, and to have information about them. The first section of the first zone contains the mouth of the Nile which has its origin in the mountain of the Qamar, as we have mentioned 62. This Nile is called the Sudanese Nile. It flows toward the surrounding sea and into it at the island of Alil 63 the city of Sila, 64 Takra, 65 and Kar 66 are situated along this Nile. At this time, all of them belong to the Mali people, 67 a Negro nation. Moroccan merchants travel to their country. Close to it in the north is the country of the Lamchua and of the other groups of the veiled Berbers, Sahaja, as well as the deserts in which they roam. To the south of this Nile, there is a Negro people called Lamlam. They are unbelievers. They brand themselves on the face and temples. The people of Kar and Takra invade their country, capture them, and sell them to merchants who transport them to the Maghreb. There, they constitute the ordinary mass of slaves. Beyond them to the south, there is no civilization in the proper sense. There are only humans who are closer to dumb animals than to rational beings. They live in thickets and caves and eat herbs and unprepared grain. They frequently eat each other 68 They cannot be considered human beings. All the fruits of the Negro territory come from fortified villages in the desert of the Maghreb, such as Twat, Tawat, Tuwat, Tigararai, 69 and Ouagla, Wagala. 70 in Kar, an Alid king and dynasty are said to have existed. These Alids were known as the Borsali. According to the author of the Book of Roger, Salih, was Salih b. Abdallah b. Hassan b. al-Hassan, but no such Salih is known among the sons of Abdallah b. Hassan 71. At this time the dynasty has disappeared, and Kha belongs to the Mali ruler. To the east of this territory, in the third section of the first zone, is the territory of Gaygor 72. It lies along a river that has its origin in certain mountains there, flows westward, and disappears in the sand in the second section. The realm of Gaygor was independent. The Mali ruler then gained power over the territory, and it came into his possession. At this time it is devastated as the result of a disturbance that happened there and that we shall mention when we discuss the Mali dynasty in its proper place in the history of the Berbers. 73. To the south of the country of Gaygor lies the territory of Kaim, a Negro nation. 74. Beyond the Mother Wagara. 75. On the border of the Sudanese Nile, to the north. To the east of the countries of the Wagara and the Kaim, there is the country of the Zakhay. 76. And the Tajura. 77. Adjoining the land of the Ubar in the fourth section of the first zone. The land of the Ubar is traversed by the Egyptian Nile throughout its course from its beginning at the equator to the Mediterranean in the north. This Nile originates at the mountain of the Qmr, 16 degrees above 78 the equator. There are different opinions as to the correct form of the name of this mountain. Some scholars read the name as Qmr moon, because the mountain is very white and luminous. Yaqut, in the Mushtarik, 79 as well as Ibn Sa'idi, 80 reads Qamar, with reference to an Indian people. 81. 10 springs issue from this mountain. 5 of them flow into one lake and 5 into another lake. There is a distance of 6 miles between the two lakes. From each of the two lakes, 3 rivers come forth. They come together in a swampy lake, Bataha, at the foot of which a mountain emerges. This mountain cuts across the lake at the northern end and divides its waters into 2 branches. The western branch flows westward through the Negro territory, and finally flows into the surrounding sea. The eastern branch flows northward through the countries of the Abyssinians and the Ubar and the region in between. At the boundary of Egypt, it divides. 3 of its branches flow into the Mediterranean at Alexandria, at Rosetta, 82 and at Damietta. 1 flows into a salt lake before reaching the sea. In the middle of the first zone along the Nile, lie the countries of the Ubar and the Abyssinians and some of the oases down to Aswan. A settled part of the Ubar country is the city of Dogala, west of the Nile. Beyond it are Alwa 83 and Ulaku 84. Beyond them, a 6 days' journey north of Ulaku, is the mountain of the Cataracts. This is a mountain which rises to a great height on the Egyptian side but is much less elevated on the side of the country of the Ubar. The Nile cuts through it and flows down precipitately in tremendous cascades for a long distance. Boats cannot get through. Cargoes from the Sudanese boats are taken off and carried on pack animals to Aswan at the entrance to Upper Egypt. In the same way, the cargoes of the boats from Upper Egypt are carried over the cataracts. The distance from the cataracts to Aswan is a 12 days' journey. The oases on the west bank of the Nile there are now in ruins. They show traces of ancient settlement. In the middle of the first zone, in its 5th section, is the country of the Abyssinians, through which a river flows, which comes from beyond the equator, and 85 flows toward the land of the Ubar, where it flows into the Nile and so on down into Egypt. Many people have held fantastic opinions about it and thought that it was part of the Nile of the Qamar, mountain of the moon. Ptolemy mentioned it in the geography. He mentioned that it did not belong to the Nile. In the middle of the first zone, in the 5th section, the Indian Ocean terminates. It comes down from the region of China and covers most of the first zone to the 5th section. Consequently, there is not much civilization there. Civilization exists only on the islands in the Indian Ocean, which are numerous and said to number up to 1,000. Civilization also exists on the southern coast of the Indian Ocean, the southernmost limit of the cultivated part of the earth, as also on its northern coast. Of these coasts, the first zone contains only a part of China to the east and the whole of the Yemen in the sixth section of this zone, where two seas branch off northwards from the Indian Ocean, namely, the Red Sea, Sea of Al-Kultum, and the Persian Gulf. Between them lies the Arabian Peninsula, comprising the Yemen, Ashshi to the east on the shore of the Indian Ocean, the Hijaz, the Yamimor, and adjacent regions which we shall mention in connection with the second zone and the regions farther north. On the western shore of the Indian Ocean is Zilla, which is on the boundary of Abyssua, and the desert plains of the Baja north of Abyssua, which lie between the mountain of Al-Alaqui 86 in the southernmost part of Upper Egypt and the Red Sea which branches off from the Indian Ocean. North of Zilla, in the northern part of this section is the Straits of Bab al-Mandeb, where the sea that branches off there is narrowed by the promontory of al-Mandeb which juts into the Indian Ocean from south to north along the west coast of the Yemen for 12 miles. As a result, the sea becomes so narrow that its width shrinks to approximately 3 miles. This is called Bab al-Mandeb. Yemeni ships pass it on their way to the coast of Suez near Egypt, Cairo. North of Bab al-Mandeb are the islands of Swaki and Daylak. Opposite it to the west are the desert plains of the Baja, a Negro nation, as we have just mentioned. To the east, on the coast of the Straits of Bab al-Mandeb, is the Tahimur of the Yemen. It includes the place of Hali B. Yaqub 87. To the south of Zilla, on the western coast of the Indian Ocean are the villages of Berbera which extend one after the other all along the southern coast of the Indian Ocean, to the end of the sixth section. There, to the east, the country of the Zaja joins them. Then 88 comes the city of Mogadishu, a very populous city with many merchants, yet nomad in character, on the southern coast of the Indian Ocean. Adjoining it to the east is the country of the Sufilar on the southern coast in the seventh section of the first zone. East of the country of the Sufilar on the southern shore, lies the country of Al-Wiquiq 89 which stretches to the end of the 10th section of the first zone, where the Indian Ocean comes out of the surrounding sea. There are many islands in the Indian Ocean. One of the largest islands is the island of Ceylon, Saradib, which is round in shape and has a famous mountain said to be the highest mountain on earth. It lies opposite Sufilar. Then, there is the island of Java, Malay archipelago, 90 an oblong island that begins opposite the land of Sufilar and extends northeastward until it approaches the coasts that constitute China's southern boundary. In the Indian Ocean, to the south China is surrounded by the islands of Al-Wiquiq, and to the east by the islands of Korea 91. There are numerous other islands in the Indian Ocean. These islands produce different kinds of perfumes and incense. They also are said to contain gold and emerald mines. Most of their inhabitants are Magians 92. They have numerous rulers. These islands present remarkable cultural features that have been mentioned by geographers. The northern coast of the Indian Ocean, in the sixth section of the first zone, is occupied by the whole of the Yemen. On the Red Sea side lies Abid, Al-Mujam, 93 and the Tihamur of the Yemen. Next beyond that is Sadr, the seat of the Zidi Imams, lying far from the Indian Ocean to the south, and from the Persian Gulf to the east. In the region beyond that are the city of Aden and, north of it, Sana'a. Beyond these two cities, to the east, is the land of Al-Arqaf and Zed, afar. Next comes the land of Hadramaut, followed by the country of Ashshi between the Indian Ocean in the south and the Persian Gulf. This part of the sixth section is the only part that is not covered by water in the middle region of the first zone. Apart from it, a small portion of the ninth section is not covered by water, as well as a larger area in the 10th section that includes the southernmost limit of China. One of China's famous cities is the city of Canton 94. Opposite it to the east are the islands of Korea, which have just been mentioned. This concludes the discussion of the first zone. The second zone. The second zone is contiguous with the northern boundary of the first zone. Opposite its western limit, in the surrounding sea, are two of the Eternal Islands, which have been mentioned. At the southernmost part of the first and second sections of the second zone, there is the land of Kuamurian 95. Then, to the east, there are the southernmost parts of the land of Kha. Then, there are the desert plains of the Zaghe Negroes. In the northernmost part, there is the desert of Isan 96. It extends uninterruptedly from west to east. It has stretches of desert which are crossed by merchants on their way from the Maghreb to the Sudan country. It includes the desert plains of the veiled Sahaja Berbers. There are many subgroups, comprising the Gudala, 97, the Lamchua, the Masufa, 98, the Lamta, and the Watriga. Directly to the east of the waste regions is the land of Feza. Then, there are the desert plains of the Asga, a Berber tribe, which extend due east in the southernmost part of the third section. This is followed, still in the third section, by part of the country of Kawa, a Negro nation. Then, there is a portion of the land of At-Tajui 99. The northernmost part of the third section is occupied by the remainder of the land of Wadi, followed directly to the east by the land of Sataraya, which is called the Inner Oases 100. The southernmost limit of the fourth section is occupied by the remainder of the land of At-Tajui. The middle of the fourth section, then, is intersected by Upper Egypt along the banks of the Nile, which flows from its source in the first zone to its mouth at the sea. In this section it passes through two mountain barriers, the mountain of the Oases in the west, and the Muqaddimah in the east. At the southern part of the section lie Essar and Omat. There is a continuous riverback region up to Asiyat and Questions, and then to Saul. There, the Nile divides into two branches. The right branch ends up at Al-Lahu, still in the fourth section. The left branch ends up at Dullars. The region between them is the southernmost part of Lower Egypt. East of Mount Muqaddimah are the deserts of Adhab, extending from the fifth section to the Sea of Suez, that is, the Red Sea, Sea of Al-Kultum, which branches off northwards from the Indian Ocean to the south. On the eastern shore of the Red Sea, in the same section, is the Hijaz, extending from the mountain of Yalamlam to Yathrib, Medina. In the middle of the Hijaz is Mecca, God honor it. And on its seashore there is the city of Jeddah, which is opposite Adhab on the western shore of the Red Sea. In the sixth section to the west is the Ajd, having as its southernmost limit Yarash and Tabala, 101, and extending up to Ukaz in the north. North of the Ajd, in the sixth section, is the remainder of the Hijaz. Directly to the east of the Ajd lies the country of Ajara and Jad. North of that is the Yamamah. Directly to the east of Ajara, there is the land of Saba and Marib, followed by the land of Ashshi, which ends at the Persian Gulf. This is the other sea that branches off northward from the Indian Ocean, as has been mentioned, and turns westward on its course in the sixth section. The northeastern area of the sixth section constitutes a triangle. At its southernmost part is the city of Qalhat, the coast, seaport, of Ashshi. North of it, on the coast, is the country of Oman, followed by the country of Al-Bahrain with Haya, at the end of the sixth section. The southwestern part of the 7th section contains a portion of the Persian Gulf connecting with the other portion of it in the 6th section. The Indian Ocean covers all the southernmost area of the 7th section. There, Western India lies along it, up to the country of Makra, which belongs to Western India. Opposite it is the country of At-Torbara 102, which also belongs to Western India. All of Western India lies in the western part of the 7th section. Western India is separated from Eastern India by stretches of desert, and is traversed by a river, the Indus, which comes from Eastern India and flows into the Indian Ocean in the south. Eastern India begins on the shore of the Indian Ocean. Directly to the east there lies the country of Balahra 103, north of it is Malta, the home of the great idol 104. The northernmost part of Eastern India is the southernmost part of the country of Sagista. The western part of the 8th section contains the remainder of the country of Balahra that belongs to Eastern India. Directly to the east of it lies the country of Gadhara 105. Then, at the southernmost part of the section, on the shore of the Indian Ocean, there is the country of Malabar, Muabar. North of it, in the northernmost part of the section, there is the country of Kabul. Beyond Kabul, to the east 105 is the territory of the Kurdish, between Inner and Outer Kashmir at the end of the zone. The 9th section, in its western part, contains farthest Eastern India, which extends to the eastern part of the section, and stretches along its southernmost part up to the 10th section. In the northernmost part here, there is a portion of China. It includes the city of Kegu 106. China then extends over the whole 10th section up to the surrounding sea. Third zone. The third zone is contiguous with the northern boundary of the second zone. The first section, about 1/3 of the way from the southernmost part of the zone, contains the Atlas Mountain 107, which runs from the western part of the first section at the surrounding sea to the eastern end of the section. This mountain is inhabited by innumerable Berber nations, as will be mentioned 108 in the region between this mountain and the second zone. At the surrounding sea, there is the Rabat Monastery, Mysore 109. East of here are the adjoining countries of Az, Sus 110 and Naun, Nul. Directly to the east of these countries is the country of Dar, followed by the country of Sijilmasa and then by a portion of the desert of Isa, the stretch of desert that we mentioned in describing the second zone. The Atlas Mountain towers over all these countries of the first section. The western region of the Atlas has few passes and roads, but near the Malwiya River, and from there on to where it ends, the Atlas has a great number of passes and roads. This region contains the Mazmuda nations, at the surrounding sea the Saxwanwa, then the High Tatar, the Timalal, the Gidmawa, 111 and then the Haskura, who are the last Mazmuda in this area. Then there are the Zyga, 112, that is, the Sahija tribes. At the boundary of the first section of the third zone, there are some Zata tribes. To the north, Mount Aras, Elores, the mountain of the Kutamor, adjoins the Atlas. After that, there are other Berber nations which we shall mention in their proper places. The Atlas Mountain in the western part of the section towers over Morocco to the north of it. In the southern part of Morocco lie Marrakech, Aghmat, and Tadla. On the surrounding sea there are the Rabat Asfi and the city of Salah. East 112 of the country of Marrakech lie Fez, Mex, Taza, and Kuazza-Kutamor, 113. This is the area that is customarily called the farthest Maghreb, Morocco, by its inhabitants. On the shore of the surrounding sea in that region lie Arsala, Azila, 114 and Larak, Al-Araish. Directly to the east of this area, there is the country of the Middle Maghrib whose center is Tlemcen, Tilimsa. On the shores of the Mediterranean there lie Hua, 115 Iran, and Algiers. The Mediterranean leaves the surrounding sea at the Straits of Tangier in the western part of the fourth zone, 116, and then extends eastward to Syria. Shortly after it leaves the narrow straits, it widens to the south and to the north and enters the third and fifth zones. This is why many places within the third zone are on the Mediterranean coast, from Tangier up to Al-Qazar as-Sakhi, then Ceuta, the country of Badis, and Garcissa. Algiers, which comes next, is near Bougie, Bajaya, on the east. Then, east of Bougie at the boundary of the first section is Constantine, a day's journey from the Mediterranean. South of these places, toward the south of the Middle Maghrib, is the territory of Ashur, with Mount Titarai, followed by Msila, Al-Masila, and the Zib. The center of the Zib is Biskra, north of Mount Aras, which connects with the Atlas, as has been mentioned. This is the eastern end of the first section. The second section of the third zone is like the first section in that about 1/3 of the distance from its southern limit lies the Atlas mountain, which extends across this section from west to east and divides it into two portions. The Mediterranean covers one area in the north. The portion south of the Atlas mountain is all desert to the west. To the east, there is Gaydams. Directly to the east of this portion is the land of Wada, the remainder of which is situated in the second zone, as has been mentioned. The portion north of the Atlas mountain between the Atlas and the Mediterranean contains in the west Mount Aras, Tebessa, and Larabus, Al-Urbus. On the seacoast is Bone, B. Directly east of these places lies the country of Ifriqiya, with the city of Tunis, then Sus, Susa, and Al-Mordia on the seacoast. South of these places and north of the Atlas mountain, is the country of the Tjarid, Jarid, Al-Jarid, Tozyor, Tusa, Gafsa, Qafsa, and Efzwe, Afzawa. Between them and the coast is the city of Keriyu, Al-Quirawa, Mount Asala, Uzlit, Wazlat, and Spitla, Subatila. Directly east of these places lies Tripoli on the Mediterranean. Facing it in the south are the mountains of the Hawara tribes, Dama, Mount Dema, and Makwara, the city of Magara, which connect with the Atlas and are opposite Gaydams, which we mentioned at the end of the southern portion. At the eastern end of the second section lies Suwaiq Atib Matkud 116 on the sea. To the south are the desert plains of the Arabs in the land of Wada. The third section of the third zone is also traversed by the Atlas mountain, but at the limit of the section, the Atlas turns northward and runs due north up to the Mediterranean. There, it is called Cape Orther. The Mediterranean covers the northern part of the third section, so that the land between it and the Atlas narrows. Behind the mountain to the southwest, there is the remainder of the land of Wada and the desert plains of the Arabs. Then, there is Zoilatib Katib, 117, followed by sandy deserts and waste regions to the eastern boundary of the section. To the west of the area between the mountain and the sea, there is Surt, at the sea. Then, there are empty and waste regions in which the Arabs roam. Then, there is Ajdabiyah and, where the mountain makes a turn, Barca, Barqua. Next comes Tulamitha, Ptolemais, on the sea. Then, to the east of the mountain, after it makes the turn, are the desert plains of the Hayab 118 and the Ruwaha, which extend to the end of the section. The southwestern part of the fourth section of the third zone contains the desert of Birais. North of it is the country of the Hayab and the Ruwaha. Then, the Mediterranean enters this section and covers part of it in a southern direction almost to the southern boundary. Between it and the end of the section, there remains a waste region through which the Arabs roam. Directly to the east of it is the Fayum, at the mouth of one of the two branches of the Nile. This branch passes by Al-Lafi in Upper Egypt, in the fourth section of the zone, and flows into the lake of the Fayum. Directly to the east of the Fayum is the land of Egypt with its famous city, Cairo, situated on the other branch of the Nile, the one that passes through Dollars in Upper Egypt at the boundary of the second section. This latter branch divides Ai, log second time into two more branches below Cairo, at Shatta'of and Zifta, h. 119. The right branch again divides into two other branches at Tarut 120. All these branches flow into the Mediterranean. At the mouth of the western branch is Alexandria, at the mouth of the middle branch is Rosetta, and at the mouth of the eastern branch is Damietta. Between Cairo and the Mediterranean coast at these points lies the whole of northern Egypt, which is densely settled and cultivated. The fifth section of the third zone contains all or most of Syria, as I shall describe it. The Red Sea ends in the southwest of the section, at Suez, because in its course from the Indian Ocean northward, it turns eventually westward. A long portion of its western extension lies in this section, with Suez at its western end. Beyond Suez, on this part of the Red Sea, there are the mountains of Para, Farah, Mount Sieh, at Tur, Elah, in Media, and, where it ends, Al-Hura 121. From there, its shoreline turns southward towards the land of the Hijaz. As has been mentioned in connection with the fifth section of the second zone, a portion of the Mediterranean covers much of the northwestern part of the fifth section. On its coast lie Al-Farama 122 and Al-Arish. The end of this portion of the Mediterranean comes close to Al-Kultum. The area in between there is narrow. It becomes a kind of gate leading into Syria. West of this gate is the desert plain, Atti, a bare country in which nothing grows, where the Israelites wandered for 40 years after they had left Egypt and before they entered Syria, as the Qur'an tells 123. In this portion of the Mediterranean, in the fifth section, lies part of the island of Cyprus. The remainder of Cyprus lies in the fourth zone, as we shall mention. Along the coastline of that narrow strip of land between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, are Al-Arish, the boundary of Egypt, and Ascalon. Between them, there is a narrow strip of land, separating the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Then, this portion of the Mediterranean turns to the north into the fourth zone at Tripoli and Agar 124. That is the eastern end of the Mediterranean. This portion of the Mediterranean comprises most of the Syrian coast. East and slightly to the north of Ascalon is Caesarea. Then, in the same general direction, Arako, Tyre, Sidon, and Arqua. The sea then turns north into the fourth zone. Opposite these places on the coast of this portion of the Mediterranean, in the fifth section, there is a big mountain which rises from the coast at Elah, on the Red Sea. It runs northeastward until it leaves the fifth section. It is called Amors, al-Lakam. It is a kind of barrier between Egypt and Syria. At the one end, near Elah, lies Al-Aqaba, which the pilgrims pass through on their way from Egypt to Mecca. After it, to the north, is Abraham's tomb at Mount Ashshara 125, which is a continuation of the aforementioned Amors north of Al-Aqaba. It extends due east, and then turns slightly to the south. East of there is Al-Hijah, the land of the Thermiled, Tama, and Dumat al-Jadal, the northernmost part of the Hijaz. South of it is Mount Radwa 126. Farther south, there are the castles of Kaaba. Between Mount Ashshara and the Red Sea lies the desert of Tabuk. North of Mount Ashshara is the city of Jerusalem near the Amors. Then, there is the Jordan and Tiberias. East of it lies the Jordan depression, Gor 126, which extends to Adriat and the Hora. Directly to the east of the Hora is Dumat al-Jadal, which constitutes the end of the Hijaz and the fifth section. Where the Amors turns north at the end of the fifth section is the city of Damascus, opposite Sidon and Beirut on the coast. The Amors lies between Sidon and Beirut, on the one hand, and Damascus, on the other. Directly east 127 of Damascus and facing it, is the city of Ba'Pounzak. Then, there is the city of Emesa at the northern end of the fifth section, where the Amors breaks off. East of Ba'Pounzak and Emesa are the city Palmyra and desert plains extending to the end of the fifth section. The southernmost part of the sixth section contains the desert plains of the Arab Bedouins, which are located to the north of the Ajd and the Yamimor in the area between the mountain of Al-Aj and As-Sami and extending to Al-Bahri and Hayar at the Persian Gulf. In the northernmost part of the sixth section, to the north of the desert plains, lie Al-Hira, Al-Qadisiyah, and the swampy lowlands of the Euphrates. Beyond that to the east is the city of Al-Basra. In the northeastern part of the sixth section, the Persian Gulf ends at Abida and Al-Ubala. The mouth of the Tigris is at Abida. The Tigris divides into many branches and takes in other branches from the Euphrates. All of them come together at Abida and flow into the Persian Gulf. This portion of the Persian Gulf is wide in the southernmost part of the section. It narrows toward its eastern boundary, and where it ends in the north it, also, is narrow. On the western coast lie the northernmost portion of Al-Bahri, Hayya, and Al-Asa. To the west of this portion of the Persian Gulf, lie Al-Kat, As-Sami, 128 and the remainder of the land of the Yamimor. The eastern coast comprises the shores of Fars. In their southernmost part, at the eastern end of the sixth section, along a line stretching from the Persian Gulf eastward and beyond it to the south, are the mountains of Al-Kafs 129 which are in Qumma. North of Hamu on the coast of the Persian Gulf, are Sarif and Ajuram. In the east, toward the end of the sixth section and north of Hamu, is the country of Fars, comprising, for instance, Sabah, Darabjad, Faizi, Istakhr, Ash-Shihiji, and Shi'ais, the principal city. North of the country of Fars, at the end of the Persian Gulf, lies the country of Khuzisti which includes Al-Ahwaz, Tusta, Judishiva, Susa, As-Sus, Rimhamu, and other cities. Araji is on the boundary between Fars and Khuzisti. To the east of the country of Khuzisti are the Kurdish mountains, which extend to the region of Isfahi. The Kurds live there. They roam beyond the mountains into the country of Fars. They are called as Tumam 130. The southwestern part of the seventh section contains the remainder of the mountains of Al-Kafs, to which are adjacent in the south and north the countries of Qumma and Makra. They include the cities of Aradha, Ash-Shurajah, Juraft, Jaraft, Yazdsha, and Al-Faraj. North of the land of Qumma is the remainder of the country of Fars up to the border of Isfahan. The city of Isfahan lies in the northwest corner of the seventh section. East of the countries of Qumma and Fars, there is the land of Sajisti to the south, and the land of Kuhista to the north. Between Qumma Fars and Sajista Kuhisti, in the middle of this section, is the great desert which has few roads because of the difficult terrain. Cities in Sajisti are Bust and At-Tiq. Kuhista belongs to the country of Kurizi. One of Kurisa's best-known places is Sarax, 131 on the boundary of the section. The 8th section contains, in the southwest, the plains of the Kalaj, 132 a Turkish nation. They adjoin the land of Sagista in the west and the land of Kabul of eastern India in the south. North of these desert plains are the mountains and country of Algar starting with Gaza, the key to India. Where Algar ends in the north, lies Asterabad. Then, to the north is the country of Herat in the middle of Kurasa, extending to the boundary of the section. It includes Isfarai, Kuisha, Bushaj, Mawarad, At-Talakua, and Al-Juzaja. This part of Kurasa extends to the river Oxus. Kurasaya places on this river are the city of Balkh to the west, and the city of At-Tamid to the east. The city of Balkh was the seat of the Turkish realm. The Oxus comes from the country of Wakha in the area of Badakhshah which borders on India, in the southeast corner of this section. It soon turns west to the middle of the section. There, it is called the Karab River. It then turns north, passes Kurasa, flows due north, and finally flows into Lake Aral in the 5th zone, as we shall mention. In the middle of the 8th section where it turns from the south to the north, 5 large rivers belonging to the country of Kutal and Waksh 133 flow into it on the east. Other rivers, coming from the Batam Mountains to the east and north of Kutal, also flow into it. The Oxus, thus, becomes wider and larger, so much so that no other river equals it in these respects. One of the 5 rivers flowing into the Oxus is the Wakshab 134 which comes from the country of Tibet that extends over the southeastern portion of this section. It flows toward the northwest. Its course is blocked by a great mountain which runs from the middle of this section in the south toward the northeast, and leaves this section close to its northern boundary, to pass into the 9th section. It crosses the country of Tibet toward the southeast portion of this section. It separates the Turks from the country of Kutal. It has only one road in the middle of this section to the east. Al-Fadl B. Yahya constructed a dam there with a gate in it, 135 like the dam of Gog and Magog. When the Wakshab leaves the country of Tibet and comes up against that mountain, it flows under it for a long distance, until it enters the country of Waksh and flows into the Oxus at the border of Balkh. The Oxus then sweeps onto At-Tamid in the north and flows into the country of Alj, Izaja. East of the country of Algar, in the region between this country and the Oxus, is the country of Albania, which belongs to Kurasa. There on the eastern bank of the river is the country of Kutal, most of which is mountainous, and the country of Waksh. This is bordered in the north by the Batam Mountains, which come from the border of Kurasa, west of the Oxus, and run eastward. Finally, where they end, a large mountain range begins, behind which lies the country of Tibet and under which there flows the Wakshab, as we have stated. The 2 mountain ranges join at the gate of Al-Fadl B. Yahya. The Oxus passes between them. Other rivers flow into it, among them the river of the country of Waksh, which flows into it from the east. Below At-Tamid in the north 135 of the Balkha River 136 comes from the Batam Mountains where it starts at Al-Juzajan, and flows into it from the west. On the western bank of this river, Oxus, lies Amal, which belongs to Kurasa. East of this river, Oxus, are the lands of the Sogd and Usrusha, which belong to the country of the Turks. East of them is the land of Fargha, which extends to the eastern end of the section. The entire country of the Turks here is crossed by the Batam Mountains on the north. In the western part of the 9th section lies the country of Tibet, up to the middle of the section. In the south is India, and in the east, to the boundary of the section, is China. In the northernmost part of this section, north of the country of Tibet, is the country of the Karluk, 137, which belongs to the country of the Turks, extending to the northern boundary of the section. Adjacent to it on the west is the land of Fargha, 138, and on the east is the land of the Turkish Tuguzhas, 139, extending to the northeastern end of the section. The southern part of the 10th section is entirely occupied by the remaining northernmost portion of China. In the north is the remainder of the country of the Tuguzhas. East of them is the country of the Turkish Kyrgyz, 140, extending to the eastern end of the section. North of the land of the Kyrgyz is the country of the Turkish Kemak, 141. Opposite the Kyrgyz and Kemak countries, in the surrounding sea, lies the Hyacinth, Ruby, island in the middle of a round mountain that completely blocks access to it. Climbing to the top of the mountain from the outside is extremely difficult. On the island, there are deadly snakes and many pebbles of hyacinth, ruby. The people of that region contrive to mine them with the help of divine inspiration. The regions in the 9th and 10th sections extending beyond Kurasa and Kutal are desert plains where innumerable Turkish nations roam. They are wandering nomads who have camels, sheep, cattle, and horses for breeding, riding, and eating. There are very many, indeed, innumerable groups. There are Muslims among them in the area adjacent to the Oxus. They make raids on the unbelievers among them, who follow the Magian 142 religion. They sell their captives to their near neighbors, who export them to Kurasa, India, and the Iraq. The 4th zone. The 4th zone is contiguous with the northern part of the 3rd zone. Its first section, in the west, contains a portion of the surrounding sea which, oblong in shape, extends from the southern to the northern boundary of the section. The city of Tangier is situated on it in the south. North of Tangier, the Mediterranean branches off from this portion of the surrounding sea in a narrow straits that is only 12 miles wide, Tarifa and Algeciras, lying to the north of it, and Qasr al-Mayaz 143 and Sutar to the south of it. It runs east until it reaches the middle of the 5th section of the 4th zone, gradually widening and eventually covering the first 4 sections and most of the 5th section of the 4th zone, as well as adjacent regions of the 3rd and 5th zones, as we shall mention. The Mediterranean is also called the Syrian Sea. It contains many islands. The largest of them, from west to east, are Ibiza, Majorca, Majorca, Sardinia, Sicily, which is the largest of them, the Peloponnesos, Crete, and Cyprus. We shall mention each of them in its particular section. At the end of the 3rd section of the 4th zone and in the 3rd section of the 5th zone, the Adriatic Sea, Straits of the Venetians, branches off from the Mediterranean. It runs in a northern direction, then turns westward in the northern half of the section, and finally ends in the 2nd section of the 5th zone. At the eastern boundary of the 4th section of the 5th zone, the Straits of Cassiopol branches off from the Mediterranean. In the north, it makes a narrow passage only an arrow shot in width, extending up to the boundary of the zone and on into the 4th section of the 6th zone, where it turns into the Black Sea, running eastward across the whole of the 5th, and half of the 6th, sections of the 6th zone. As we shall mention in the proper place. Where the Mediterranean leaves the surrounding sea through the Straits of Tangier and expands into the 3rd zone, there remains a small portion of this section south of the straits. The city of Tangier is situated in it, at the confluence of the 2 seas. After Tangier comes Sutar on the Mediterranean, then Tetua, Titoui, and Badis. The remainder of this section to the east is covered by the Mediterranean, which extends into the third zone. Most of the cultivated area in this section is north of it and north of the straits. All this is Spain. The western part of Spain, the area between the surrounding sea and the Mediterranean, begins at Tarifa, at the confluence of the two seas. East of it, on the shore of the Mediterranean, is Algeciras, followed by Malaga, Almucar, and Almería. Northwest of these cities and close to the surrounding sea, there is Jerez de la Frontera, followed by Ibla. Opposite these two cities, in the surrounding sea, is the island of Cadiz. East of Jerez and Ibla are Sevilla, followed by Ecija, Córdoba, and Marbella. 144 then Granada, Uy, and Ubeda, then Guadix and Baza. Northwest of these cities on the surrounding sea are Santamaria and Silves. North, east of these two cities are Badajoz, Merida, and Evora 145 followed by Gaficu 146 and Trujillo, and then Calatrava. Northwest of these cities on the surrounding sea, there is Lisbon on the Tajo. East of Lisbon, on the Tajo, are Santarém and Coria. Then, there is Alcátara. Facing Lisbon on the east, there rises the Sierra de Guadarrama, which starts in the west there and runs eastward along the northern boundary of the section. It ends at Medinaceli beyond the middle of the section. Below, at the foot of the Sierra, is Talavera, east of Coria, followed by Toledo, Guadalajara, and Medinaceli. Where the Sierra begins, in the region between the Sierra and Lisbon, is Coimbra. This is western Spain. Eastern Spain is bordered by the Mediterranean. Here, Almería is followed by Cartagena, Alicante, Dia, and Valencia, up to Tarragona 147 at the eastern boundary of the section. North of these cities are Lorca and Segura, adjacent to Baza and Calatrava, which belong to western Spain. To the east, then, comes Murcia, followed by Jartiva north of Valencia, 148 then Juca, 149 Tortosa, and 150 Tarragona at the boundary of the section. Then, north of these cities, there are the lands of Chinchilla and Jaque, which are adjacent to Segura and Toledo in the west. Northeast of Tortosa, then, is Fraga. East of Medinaceli, there is Calatayud, followed by Sariosa and Lerida at the northeastern end of the section. The second section of the fourth zone is entirely covered by water, except for a portion in the northwest which includes the remainder of the Pyrenees, 151 the mountain of passes and roads. It comes there from the boundary of the first section of the fifth zone. It starts at the southeastern limit of the surrounding sea on the boundary of this section, runs southeastward, and enters the fourth zone upon leaving the first section for the second, so that a portion of it falls into the fourth zone. Its passes lead into the adjacent mainland, which is called the land of Gascoge. It contains the cities of Gerona and Carcasso. On the shores of the Mediterranean in this portion, is the city of Barcelona, followed by Arbo. The sea which covers this section contains many islands, most of which are uninhabited because they are small. In the west, there is the island of Sardinia, and in the east the large island of Sicily. Its circumference is said to be 700 miles. It contains many cities, the best known among them being Syracuse, Palermo, Trapani, Mazara, and Murcia. Sicily is opposite Iphricuia. Between Sicily and Iphricuia are the islands of Gozzo and Malta. The third section of the fourth zone is also covered by the sea, except for three portions in the north. The one in the west belongs to the land of Calabriae, the one in the middle to Lombardy, and the one in the east to the country of the Venetians. The fourth section of the fourth zone is also covered by the sea, as has been mentioned. It contains many islands. Most of them are uninhabited, as is the case in the third section. The inhabited islands are the Peloponnesos, in the northwest, and Crete, which is oblong in shape and stretches from the middle of the section to the southeast. A large triangular area of the fifth section in the southwest is covered by the sea. The western side of this triangle goes to the northern boundary of the fifth section. The southern side goes across about 2/3 of the section. There remains at the eastern side of the section a portion of about 1/3. Its northern part runs west along the sea coast, as we have stated. Its southern half contains the northernmost region of Syria. It is traversed in the middle by the Amurs. The Amurs eventually reaches the northern end of Syria, where it turns in a northeasterly direction. At the point where it turns, it is called Chain Mountain. 152 There, it enters the fifth zone. After it turns, it traverses a portion of the Jazira in an easterly direction. West of where it turns, there rise contiguous mountain ranges. They finally end at an inlet of the Mediterranean, near the northern end of the section. Through these mountains, there are passes which are called Ad-Darab, mountain passes. They lead into Armenia. This section contains a portion of Armenia situated between these mountains and the Chain Mountain. The southern region, as we have mentioned before, comprises the northernmost region of Syria, and the Amurs extends across it from south to north in the area between the Mediterranean and the boundary of the section. On the sea coast is Atasus, 153 at the beginning of the section to the south. It borders on Arqua and Tripoli, which lie on the shore of the Mediterranean in the third zone. North of Atasus is Jabalah, followed by Latakia, Alexandretta, and Selefka. North of these cities is the Byzantine territory. The Amurs, which lies between the sea and the end of the section, is hugged, in Syria in the southwestern part of the section, by the fortress of Linzis al-Kawabai, which belongs to the Ismaili assassins who at this time are called Fidois. The fortress, also, is called Maziat 154. It lies opposite Atasus to the east. On the side opposite this fortress, east of the Amurs, is Salamlaya, north of Emesa. North of Maziat, between the mountain and the sea, lies Ashiok. Opposite it, east of the Amurs, is Al-Mar'ara, and east of Al-Mar'ara, Al-Maraya. North of Ashiok, there is Al-Marsisa, followed by Adhar and Tarsus, at the furthest point of Syria. Facing Ashiok, west of the mountain, is Qusrai, followed by Azarba. Opposite Qusrai, east of the mountain, is Aleppo, and opposite Azarba is Mabij, the furthest point of Syria. The area to the right of the Darab, between them and the Mediterranean, comprises the Byzantine territory, Anatolia. At this time, it belongs to the Turkomans and is ruled by Ibuthma, the Ottomans. 155 On the shore of the Mediterranean there are Atalia and Alalaya. Armenia, which lies between the Darab and the Chain Mountain, comprises Marchash, Malatia, and Ankara. 155 are up to the northern end of the section. In Armenia, in the fifth section, originate the river Jahar and, to the east of it, the river Sahar. The Jahar flows south until it has traversed the Darab. It then passes by Tarsus and Al-Marsisa, then turns northwestward and eventually flows into the Mediterranean south of Selefka. The Sahar runs parallel to the Jahar. It is opposite Ankara and Marchash, traverses the Darab Mountains, reaches Syria, then passes by Azarba, then turns away from the Jahar, and turns northwestward. It joins the Jahar west of Al-Marsisa. The Jazira, which is surrounded by the portion of the Amurs that turns into the Chain Mountain, contains in the south Arafikua and Arakwa, followed by Hara, Siraj, Idizar, Isabis, Somozata, and Amid, north of the Chain Mountain, at the northeastern end of the section. The Euphrates and the Tigris traverse this area in the middle. They originate in the 5th zone, pass southward through Armenia, and cross the Chain Mountain. The Euphrates, then, flows west of Somozata and Siraj in an easterly direction. It passes west of Arafikua and Arakwa and on into the 6th section. The Tigris flows east of Amid and shortly thereafter turns to the east. Then, it soon passes on into the 6th section. The 6th section of the 4th zone contains the Jazira to the west. Immediately east of it is the country of the Iraq, which terminates near the boundary of the section. At the boundary of the Iraq is the mountain of Isfahan, which comes from the south of the section and runs in a westerly direction. When it reaches the middle of the northern end of the section, it runs west. Eventually, leaving the 6th section, it joins on its course due west, the Chain Mountain in the 5th section. The 6th section is divided into two portions, a western and an eastern. The western portion, in the south, contains the point where the Euphrates leaves the 5th section, and, in the north, the point where the Tigris leaves it. As soon as the Euphrates enters the 6th section, it passes Qurquzia. There, a river branches off from the Euphrates. It flows north into the Jazira and disappears there in the ground. Shortly past Qurquzia, the Euphrates turns south and passes to the west of the Kaaba and on west of Araba. A river branches off there from the Euphrates and flows south. Safi lies to the west of it. This river then turns east and divides into a number of branches. Some of them pass by Al-Kufa, others by Qaza'ib Hubira and Al-Jamiyah, Al-Hila. Now, in the south of the section all of them enter the 3rd zone and disappear into the ground east of Al-Hira and Al-Qadisiyah. The Euphrates flows directly east from Araba, and passes north of Hit. It then flows south of Azab 155b and Alaba, and into the Tigris at Baghdad. When the Tigris leaves the 5th section for the 6th section, it flows due east, opposite the Chain Mountain which connects with the mountain of Al-Iraq on its course due west, and passes north of Jazirat Yuma. Then it passes Mosul in the same way, and Tikrit. It reaches Al-Aditha, turns south, leaving Al-Aditha to the east of it, and likewise the Greater and the Lesser Zab. It flows directly south and to the west of Al-Qadisiyah. Eventually it reaches Baghdad and joins with the Euphrates. Then it flows south, to the west of Jarjariya, and eventually leaves the section and enters the 3rd zone. There it divides into many branches. They unite again and there flow into the Persian Gulf at Abadi. The region between the Tigris and the Euphrates, before they have come together at Baghdad, is the Jazira. Below Baghdad, another river joins the Tigris. It comes from northeast of the Tigris. It reaches Anarawi opposite Baghdad to the east. Then it turns south and joins with the Tigris before entering the 3rd zone. For the region between this river and the mountains of Al-Iraq and Kurdistan, there remains Jaluli and, east of it at the mountain, Hawi and Samarra. The western portion of the section contains a mountain that starts from the Kurdish mountains and runs east toward the end of the section. It is called the Mountain of Shahrazad. It divides the western portion into two subdivisions. The southern subdivision contains Quji, northwest of Isfahan. This section is called the country of Al-Balas 156. In the middle of the southern subdivision is a Highwad, and, in the north, Shahrazad, west of the point where the two mountain ranges meet, and Ad-Diyah, is, on the east, at the boundary of the section. The other subdivision contains part of Armenia, including its principal place, Almeria. The portion of the mountain of Al-Iraq that faces it is called the mountain of Birima 157. It is inhabited by Kurds. The Greater Zab and the Lesser Zab at the Tigris are behind it. At the eastern end of this section lies Azerbaijan, which includes Tabriz and Al-Balaga 158. In the northeast corner of the section is a small portion of the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea of the Khazars. 159. The seventh section of the fourth zone contains, in the southwest, the largest portion of the country of Albalas, including Hamadi and Qazwi. The remainder of it is in the third zone. Isfahan is situated there. Albalas and Isfahan are surrounded on the south by mountains which come from the west, pass through the third zone, leave it in the sixth section for the fourth zone, and join the eastern portion of the mountain of Al-Iraq, as has been mentioned before. They, also, surround the eastern portion of the country of Albalas. These mountains which surround Isfahan run north from the third zone, enter this seventh section, and then enclose the country of Albalas on the east. Below, at the foot of them, is Kuishi, followed by Kum. Near the middle of their course, they turn slightly west, then, describing an arc, they run northeastward, and eventually enter the fifth zone. Where they turn west, and make the circle, Ari lies to the east. Where they turn west, another mountain range starts and runs west to the boundary of the seventh section. South of the mountains there is Qazwi. North of them and alongside the connecting mountains of Ari, extending in a northeastern direction to the middle of the section. And then into the fifth zone, lies the country of Tabarista in the region between these mountains and a portion of the Caspian Sea, Sea of Tabarista. From the fifth zone, it enters the seventh section about halfway between west and east. Where the mountains of Ari turn west, there lie other, connecting mountains. They run directly east and slightly south, and eventually enter the eighth section from the west. Between the mountains of Ari and these mountains, at their starting point, there remains Jawat, which includes Bistam 160. Behind these latter mountains, there is a part of the seventh section that contains the remainder of the desert area between Fars and Kurisa, to the east of Kuishi. At its farthest point, near these mountains, is Astarabad. On the eastern slopes of these mountains, and extending to the boundary of the section, lies the country of Izaba, which belongs to Kurazi. South of the mountains and east of the desert area, lies Izaba, followed by Mawashshi Hija 161 at the end of the section. North of it and east of Jawat, are Miraji, Kazaru, and Tus, the eastern end of the section. All these places are north of the mountains. Far to the north of them is the country of Nasser, which is surrounded by barren stretches of desert, in the northeastern corner of the section. The eighth section of the fourth zone, in the west, contains the Oxus which flows from south to north. On its western bank, there are Zam 162 and Amal which belong to Kurisa, as well as At-Tahiriyah and Gurgaj which belongs to Kuwarizm. The southwest corner of the section is surrounded by the mountains of Astarabad, which were found already in the seventh section. They enter this section from the west and encircle the southwestern corner, which includes the remainder of the country of Herat. In the third zone, the mountains pass between Herat and Al-Juzaja, and eventually connect with the Batam mountain, as we mentioned there. East of the Oxus in the south of this section, is the country of Bukhara, followed by the country of the Sogd, with Samarkand as its principal place. Then comes the country of Usrat Shah, which includes Kuyada at the eastern end of the section. north of Samarkand and Usrusha, is the land of Ilaku 163. North of Ilaku is the land of Tashkent, Ashshish, which extends to the eastern boundary of the section and occupies a portion of the 9th section that in the south includes the remainder of the land of Fargha. From this portion of the 9th section, comes the river of Tashkent, Syadaria. It cuts through the 8th section, and eventually flows into the Oxus where the latter leaves the 8th section in the north for the 5th zone. In the land of Ilaku, a river coming from the 9th section of the 3rd zone, from the borders of Tibet, flows into the river of Tashkent, and before the latter leaves the 9th section, the river of Fargha flows into it. Parallel to the river of Tashkent lies Mount Jabragu, which starts from the 5th zone, turns southeast, and eventually enters the 9th section and runs along the borders of the land of Tashkent. Then, it turns in the 9th section, continues along the boundaries of Tashkent and Fargha, goes on to the southern part of the section, and then enters the 3rd zone. Between the river of Tashkent and the bend of this mountain in the middle of the section, there is the country of Farab. Between it and the land of Bukhari and Khawarizm are barren stretches of desert. In the northeast corner of this section is the land of Quyida, 163, which includes Isbiab 164 and Taras 165. The 9th section of the 4th zone, to the west beyond Fargha and Tashkent, contains the land of the Kalak in the south, and the land of the Kalak 166 in the north. The whole eastern part of the section to its farthest point is occupied by the land of the Kimak. It extends over the whole 10th section to the Kafaya Mountains 167, which are at the eastern end of the section and lie there on a portion of the surrounding sea. They are the mountains of Gog and Magog. All these nations are Turkish peoples. The 5th zone. Most of the first section of the 5th zone is covered by water, except a small portion of the south and of the east. In this western region, the surrounding sea enters into the 5th, 6th, and 7th zones from the circle it describes around the zones. The portion to the south that is free from water has a triangular shape. It there touches Spain and comprises the remainder of it. It is surrounded on two sides by the sea, as if by the two sides of a triangle. It occupies the remainder of western Spain, including Montemayor 168 on the sea coast at the beginning of the section in the southwest. Salamanca is to the east, and Zamora to the north. East of Salamanca, at the southern end, is Avila, and east of it, the land of Castilla with the city of Segovia. North of it is the land of Leon and Burgos. Beyond it to the north is the land of Galicia, which extends to the corner of this portion. At the surrounding sea there, at the far point of the western side, of the triangle, the portion includes the region of Santiago, that is, Saint Jacob. Of eastern Spain, the triangular portion contains the city of Tudela, at the southern end of the section and to the east of Castilla. To the northeast of Tudela are Huesca and Pamplona directly to the east of Huesca. West of Pamplona, there is Estella, Cuastella, followed by Ajera 169 in the region between Estella and Burgos. This triangular portion contains a large mountain. It faces the sea and the northeast side of the triangle, in close proximity both to it and to the sea coast at Pamplona in the east. We have mentioned before that it connects in the south with the Mediterranean in the 4th zone. It constitutes a barrier for Spain in the north. Its passes are gates leading from Spain to the country of Gascogne, which belongs to the European Christian nations. In the 4th zone, there belong to Gascogne, Barcelona and Arbo on the shore of the Mediterranean, north of them, Gerua and Carcasso, and in the 5th zone, Toulouse, north of Gerua. The eastern portion of this section has the shape of an oblong triangle with its acute angle beyond the Pyrenees to the east. On the surrounding sea, at the top where it connects with the Pyrenees, this portion includes Bayonne. At the end of it, in the northeastern region of the section, is the land of Poitou, which belongs to the European Christians and extends to the end of the section. The western region of the second section contains the land of Gascogne. North of it are the lands of Poitou and Bourges 170. Both countries have been mentioned by us. East of the country of Gascogne lies a portion of the Mediterranean. It projects into this section like a tooth, in an easterly direction. To the west, the country of Gascogne juts out into a gulf of the Mediterranean. At the northern extremity of this portion is the country of Genoa, along which to the north lie the Alps 171. At their northern limit lies the land of Burgundy. East of the Gulf of Genoa, which comes from the Mediterranean, another gulf comes from the same sea. The two gulfs include a portion of land in the shape of a peninsula on which, in the west, lies Pisa, and in the east the great city of Rome, the capital of the European Christians and the residence of the Pope, their highest religious dignitary. It contains magnificent, historically famous buildings, imposing monuments, 172 and gigantic churches. One of the remarkable things at Rome is the river that flows through it from east to west, the bed of which is paved with copper. 173. Rome contains the church of the apostles Peter and Paul, who are buried in it. North of the country of Rome is the country of Lombardy, which extends to the boundary of the section. On the eastern shore of the gulf on which Rome is situated, lies Naples. It is adjacent to the country of Calabria, which, also, belongs to the lands of the European Christians. North of it, a portion of the Adriatic Sea, Gulf of Venice, comes into this section from the third section, turns west, and faces north in this section, and extends to about 1/3 of it. A large portion of the country of the Venetians is situated on this portion of the Adriatic Sea, in the south, 174 in the region between the Adriatic Sea and the surrounding sea. North of it lies the country of Aquileia in the 6th zone. The third section of the 5th zone contains in the west the country of Calabria, between the Adriatic Sea and the Mediterranean. Part of the mainland in the Mediterranean in the 4th zone forms a portion of land in the shape of a peninsula, between two gulfs that extend due north from the Mediterranean into this section. 175. East of the country of Calabria is the country of the Lombards. 176. Along a portion of land formed by the Adriatic Sea and the Mediterranean, of which one end enters the 4th zone and the Mediterranean. To the east, this section is surrounded by the Adriatic Sea, which belongs to the Mediterranean. It flows due north, then turns west opposite the northern end of the section. Alongside it, a large mountain range comes from the 4th zone. It faces it, the sea, and runs parallel to it on its way north, then turns west along it in the 6th zone, and eventually ends opposite a straits in the north of it, in the country of Aquileia, a German Alemanni nation, as we shall mention. At this straits and between it and this mountain range, where the mountains and the sea go off to the north, lies the country of the Venetians. Where the mountains and the sea go off to the west, they border the country of Jawasiyai, and then the country of the Germans, Alemanni, at the end of the straits. The 4th section of the 5th zone contains a portion of the Mediterranean which enters it from the 4th zone. This portion of the sea is strongly indented by arms of the sea which jut out in a northerly direction and are separated by portions of land in the shape of peninsulas. At the eastern end of the section lies the Straits of Costachiopole. This narrow body of water, comes from this southern part of the section, flows due north, and eventually enters the 6th zone. There, it immediately turns eastward, and joins the Black Sea in the 5th section. The latter also occupies part of the 4th and 6th sections of the 6th zone, as we shall mention. Costaciopole is to the east of this straits at the northern end of the section. It is a large city and was the seat of the Byzantine emperors. There are many stories about the magnificent architectural and other monuments there. The portion of this section between the Mediterranean and the Straits of Costaciopole comprises the country of Macedonia, which belonged to the ancient Greeks, whose royal authority had its origin there. East of the straits and extending to the end of the section, there is a portion of the land of Battus 177. This, I believe, is the desert plains where, at the present time, the Turkomans roam. There is, located, the realm of Ibuthma, the Ottomans, with its chief city Bursa, 178 before them. It belonged to the Byzantines, from whom it was taken away by other nations, and eventually came into possession of the Turkomans. The southwestern part of the 5th section of the 5th zone contains the land of Battus, Artalia. North of it and extending to the boundary of the section, is the country of Amorium. East of Amorium is the Kubajib, Tukmasu, 178, which flows into the Euphrates. It has its source in a mountain there and flows south until it joins the Euphrates, before the latter leaves this section and crosses over into the 4th zone. West of the Euphrates, at the southern end of the section, the Sahar, and west of it, the Jahar, originate. Both rivers flow alongside the Euphrates. They have been mentioned before. East of the Euphrates, there, the Tigris originates. It always flows alongside the Euphrates, and eventually joins it at Baghdad. In the southeastern corner of this section, behind the mountain where the Tigris originates, lies Myarf Arakui. The Kubaykuib, which we have mentioned, divides this section into two portions. The one covers the southwest and contains the land of Battus, Artalia, as we have said. The northernmost part of the land of Battus, the region extending to the northern end of the section and beyond the mountain where the Kubaykuib originates, is the land of Amorium, as we have said. The other portion covers the northeastern and southeastern third of the section. In the south of this the Tigris and Euphrates originate. In the north, there is the country of Al-Balagi, which adjoins the land of Amorium behind Mount Kubajib 179 and extends far. At its end, where the Euphrates originates, is Karshar 180. In the northeast corner is a portion of the Black Sea that connects with the Straits of Costaciopole. The 6th section of the 5th zone contains in the southwest the country of Armenia, which extends eastward beyond the middle of the section. Erzurum, is in the southwest of Armenia. To the north of it, lie Tiflis and Dabil. East of Artsur is the city of Kilat, followed by Bardha. In the southeast is the capital city of Armenia. There, Armenia, entering the 4th zone, includes Almarugha, east of the mountain of the Kurds, which is called Mountain of Barima, and which has been mentioned before in connection with the 6th section of the 4th zone. In this section, and in the 4th zone, Armenia is bordered to the east by the country of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's easternmost point in this section is Ardabil, on a portion of the Caspian Sea. The Caspian Sea enters this section from the east from the 7th section, and is called the Sea of Tabarista, Caspian Sea. On its northern shore, in this section, it contains a portion of the country of the Khazars. They are Turkomans. At the northern end of this portion of the Caspian Sea, a mountain range begins and runs due west to the fifth section, crosses it, encircles Myar-Farakui, and enters the fourth zone at Amid, where it connects with the Chain Mountain in the northernmost part of Syria. And from there, goes on to connect with the Amors, as has already been mentioned. In these mountains in the northern part of this section, there are passes that constitute a sort of gates giving entry from both sides. To the south is the country of the gates, which extends eastward to the Caspian Sea. The city of Debed, 181, which belongs to this country, lies on the Caspian Sea. In the southwest, the country of the gates adjoins Armenia. East of the country of the gates, between it and southern Azerbaijan, is the country of Aran, 182, which extends to the Caspian Sea. North of these mountains, there lies a portion of this section comprising in the west the realm of the Suri, 183. The northwest corner of that portion, which constitutes the northwest corner of the whole section, is also occupied by a small portion of the Black Sea that connects with the Straits of Costachiopol. This has been mentioned before. This portion of the Black Sea is surrounded by the country of the Suri. Trebizond, which belongs to that country, lies on it. The country of the Suri extends between the mountains of the gates and the northern part of the section. It eventually reaches a mountain in the east that constitutes a barrier between it and the land of the Khazars. On the far boundary of the country of the Suri is the city of Sul. Behind this mountain barrier, there is a portion of the land of the Khazars reaching the northeast corner of this section, between the Caspian Sea and the northern end of the section. The seventh section of the fifth zone is entirely covered in the west by the Caspian Sea, a portion of which protrudes into the fourth zone to the south. On the shores of this portion are situated, as we have mentioned in connection with the fourth zone, the country of Tabaristi and the mountains of the Dalam up to Qazwi. In the west of this portion and connecting with it, there is the small portion that lies in the sixth section of the fourth zone. Connecting with it in the north is the portion that lies in the eastern part of the sixth section above. A part of the northwest corner of this section, where the Volga flows into it, is not covered by the Caspian Sea. In the eastern region of this section there, also, remains a part which is not covered by the Caspian Sea. It consists of desert plains in which the Guz, a Turk nation, roam. They are also called the Ktis. Guz looks like an Arabizatio, with KH becoming GH, and doubling of the Z184. This part is surrounded by a mountain range to the south that enters the eighth section, runs not quite halfway through the western part, turns north, eventually touches the Caspian Sea, hugs it closely all the way through its remaining portion in the sixth zone, then turns at its end, and separates from it. There, it is called Mount Shia 185. It runs westward to the sixth section of the sixth zone, then turns back south to the sixth section of the fifth zone. It is this end of the mountain range that lies in this section between the land of the Suri and the land of the Khazars. The land of the Khazars extends along the slopes of the mountain called Mount Shia in the 6th and 7th sections, as will be mentioned. The whole 8th section of the 5th zone contains desert plains where the Guz, a Turkish nation, roam. In the southwest is Lake Aral, into which the Oxus flows. Its circumference is 300 miles. Many rivers flow into it from these desert plains. In the northeast is the Lake of Gurgu, 186, a freshwater lake. Its circumference is 400 miles. In the northern region of this section stands Mount Murdha, 187, which means snow mountain, because the snow on it never melts. It lies at the far end of the section. South of the Lake of Gurgu there is a mountain of solid stone where nothing grows. It is called Gurgu Mountain. The lake is named after it. In the Gurgu and Murghar mountains north of the lake, innumerable rivers have their origin. They flow into the lake from both sides. The 9th section of the 5th zone contains the country of the Udkish, 188, a Turkish nation, west of the country of the Guz, and east of the country of the Kemak. In the east at its end, the section is hugged by the Kuafaya mountains that surround Gog and Magog. They stretch there from south to north, assuming this direction right after entering from the 10th section, which they had, in turn, entered from the end of the 10th section of the 4th zone. There, they border the surrounding sea on the northern boundary of the section. They then turn west in the 10th section of the 4th zone and extend almost to the middle of the section. From where they begin to this point, they surround the country of the Kemak. Entering the 10th section of the 5th zone, they cross it in a westerly direction to its end. South of them remains a portion of that section that stretches west in an oblong shape and contains the end of the country of the Kemak. The mountains, then, enter the 9th section at its northeastern border, soon turn north, and run due north to the 9th section of the 6th zone, where the dam of Gog and Magog is situated, as we shall mention. There remains the portion that is surrounded by the Kuafaya mountains in the northeast corner of this section. It is oblong in shape and stretches southward. It belongs to the country of Gog. The 10th section of the 5th zone is entirely covered by the land of Gog, except for a portion of the surrounding sea which covers part of it in the east from south to north, and except for the portion that the Kuafaya mountains leave in the southwest on their way through the section. Everything else is the land of Gog. The 6th zone. Half of the first section of the 6th zone is mostly covered by the sea, which stretches eastward in a curving line along the northern part, then runs southward along the eastern part, and ends near the southern part of the section. A portion of land in this part is not covered by the sea. It is similar in shape to a peninsula, formed by two arms of the surrounding sea. It is long and wide. All this is the land of Brittany. At the entrance to it, between those two arms of the sea, and in the southeast corner of this section, there is the country of seas which is adjacent to the country of Poitou. The country of Poitou has been mentioned before in connection with the first and second sections of the 5th zone. The second section of the 6th zone is entered by the surrounding sea in the west and north. In the northwest, it covers an oblong portion, extending over more than half. The south-north extension of the section 188 east of Brittany, which was mentioned in the first section. This portion of the sea connects with the other portion in the north, that extends from west to east. It widens somewhat in the western half of the section. There, a portion of the island of England is situated. It is a large, far-flung island which contains a number of cities and is the seat of a magnificent realm. The remainder of England lies in the 7th zone. South of and adjacent to this western part and the island located there, and still, in the western half of this section, are the countries of Normandy and Flanders. Then, there is northern France in the southwest of this section, and, east of it, the country of Burgundy. All these countries belong to the European Christian nations. The eastern half of the section contains the country of the Germans, Alemanni. The south is taken up by the country of Aquileia, with the country of Burgundy farther north, and then the lands of Lorraine and Saxony. On a portion of the surrounding sea in the northeast corner, is the land of Frisia. All these countries belong to the German, Alemanni, nations. The western part of the third section of the sixth zone contains, in the south, the country of Bohemia, 189, and in the north, the country of Saxony. The eastern part contains, in the south, the country of Hungary, and in the north, the country of Poland. Hungary and Poland are separated by the Carpathian Mountains, Balwat. They come from the fourth section, run northwest, and eventually end in the country of Saxony at the boundary of the western half of this section. The fourth section of the sixth zone, in the south, contains the country of Jathulia, 189, and, in the north, the country of Russia. They are separated by the Carpathian Mountains, from the beginning of the section in the west to its end in the eastern half. East of the land of Jathulia is the country of Jumaya. In the southeast corner, there is the land of Kostachiopol and the city of Kostachiopol at the end of the straits coming from the Mediterranean, where it connects with the Black Sea. A small portion of the Black Sea connecting with the straits appears in the southeast corner of the section. The corner between the straits and the Black Sea contains Musa. 190. The fifth section of the sixth zone, in the south, contains the Black Sea, stretching due east from the straits at the end of the fourth section. It traverses the whole of this section and part of the sixth section, covering a distance, in length, of 1,300 miles from its beginning and, in width, of 600 miles. Beyond the Black Sea in the south of this section, there remains a piece of the mainland which is oblong in shape and stretches from west to east. The western portion of it contains Heraclea 191 on the shore of the Black Sea, a city adjacent to the country of Albalacua in the fifth zone. In the eastern portion of it is the land of the Alas, with its principal place, Sciope, on the Black Sea. North of the Black Sea in this section is the land of the Bulgars, Bawa, 192 in the west, and in the east the country of Russia. All these countries lie on the shores of the Black Sea. The country of Russia surrounds the country of the Bulgars, Bawa, bordering it, in the eastern portion of this section, in the northern portion of the fifth section of the seventh zone, and in the western portion of the fourth section of the sixth zone. The sixth section of the sixth zone contains in the west the remainder of the Black Sea, where it turns slightly north. Between the Black Sea and the northern boundary of the section is the country of the Comas 193. Following the northward direction of the Black Sea, there is the remainder of the country of the Alas, which was at the southern end of the fifth section and which here becomes wider as it extends northwards. In the eastern part of this section, the land of the Khazars continues, and farther east lies the land of the Burtars 194. In the northeast corner is the land of the Bulgars, Bulfa. In the southeast corner is the land of Balaja, 195, which is there traversed by a portion of Mount Shia 196. These mountains follow the coast of the Caspian Sea later on in the seventh section, and, after separating from it, run west across this part of the sixth section, and enter the sixth section of the fifth zone, where they are linked with the mountains of the Gates. The country of the Khazars lies on both sides of them. The seventh section of the sixth zone contains in the south an area that Mount Shia cuts across, to the western boundary of the section, after leaving the Caspian Sea. It is a portion of the country of the Khazars. East of the country of the Khazars is the portion of the coast of the Caspian Sea that is traversed by Mount Shia in the northeast. Beyond Mount Shia, in the northwest, is the land of the Burbs. In the east, 197–198 portion of the section is the land of the Bashkirs and the Pechegs, Turkish nations. The entire southern part of the 8th section of the 6th zone is occupied by the land of the Kluk Turks 199. The northern region contains in the west the Stinking Land 200 and, in the east, the land Gog and Magog are said to have laid waste before the dam was constructed. In this Stinking Land, the Volga, one of the largest rivers in the world, originates. It passes through the country of the Turks and flows into the Caspian Sea in the 7th section of the 5th zone. The Volga makes many turnings. It originates in a mountain in the Stinking Land, from which 3 streams issue and unite to form one river. It flows due west to the boundary of the 7th section of the 6th zone and turns north into the 7th section of the 7th zone, where it flows along the southwestern boundary. It leaves the 7th zone in the 6th section, flows a short distance west, then turns south a second time, and returns to the 6th section of the 6th zone, where a branch comes out of it and flows westward into the Black Sea in that section. The Volga itself next passes through a portion of the country of the Bulgars, Bulfar, in the northeast, leaves the 6th zone in the 7th section to turn south a third time, flows through Mount Shia, traverses the country of the Khazars, and enters the 5th zone in the 7th section. There it flows into the Caspian Sea, in that portion of the southwest corner of the section which is not covered by the sea. The 9th section of the 6th zone, in the west, contains the country of the Kipchak Turks, the Kypchaks, and the country of the Turgish, 201, who are also Turks. In the east, it contains the country of Magog, which is separated from the west by the aforementioned surrounding 201 Akafaya Mountains. They start at the surrounding sea in the eastern part of the 4th zone, and follow the surrounding sea to the northern boundary of the zone. There, they leave it and run northwesterly until they enter the 9th section of the 5th zone, where they return to their former due northerly course into the 9th section of the 6th zone, which they cross from south to north, bearing a little to the west. There, in the middle of the mountains, is the dam built by Alexander. The mountains, then, continue due north into the 9th section of the 7th zone, which they traverse from the south on up to the surrounding sea in the north. They follow along it from there westward into the 5th section of the 7th zone, where they encounter a portion of the surrounding sea to the west. In the middle of this 9th section is the dam built by Alexander, as we have said. Correct information about it is found in the Quran. Ubaydullah b. Qureydadbi mentioned in his geographical work 202 that al-Wathaiq saw in a dream that the dam had opened. Frightened, he awakened and sent Salam, the dragoman, to investigate the dam and to bring back information about it and a description of it, which he did. This is a long story that has nothing to do with the purpose of our work. The 10th section of the 6th zone is occupied by the country of Magog, extending to the end of the section. There it borders on a portion of the surrounding sea which surrounds the section to the east and north. This portion is oblong in the north and widens somewhat in the east. The 7th zone. The surrounding sea covers most of the 7th zone in the north, from the beginning to the middle of the 5th section, where it touches the Kafaya Mountains that surround Gog and Magog. The first and second sections are covered by water, except for the portion not covered by water where the island of England is located, most of which lies in the second section. In the first section, there is a corner of England which extends towards the north. The remainder, with a portion of the sea that encircles it, lies in the second section of the 6th zone. It was mentioned there. The channel connecting England with the mainland is there 12 miles wide. Beyond the island of England, in the north of the second section, is the island of Raslada 203, oblong in shape, stretching lengthwise from west to east. Most of the third section of the seventh zone is covered by water, except for an oblong portion in the south that is wider in its eastern part. Here, the land of Poland continues. It was mentioned in connection with the third section of the sixth zone, as lying in the north of it. In the western part of the portion of the sea covering this section, there lies a round, wide island. It is connected with the mainland by an isthmus in the south, which leads to the land of Poland. North of it is the island of Norway, 204 oblong in shape, which stretches lengthwise from west to east in the north of the section. The fourth section of the seventh zone is entirely covered in the north by the surrounding sea from the western to the eastern boundaries of the section. Its southern part is not covered by the sea. To the west, it contains the land of the Finland. 205 Turks. To the east lies the country of Tavast, 206 followed by the land of Estonia. 207 extending to the eastern boundary of the section. Estonia is permanently covered by snow and has little civilization. It borders on the country of Russia in the fourth and fifth sections of the sixth zone. The fifth section of the seventh zone contains in the west the country of Russia. In the north, Russia, 207 extends to where the portion of the surrounding sea and the Kafaya Mountains meet, as we have mentioned before. The eastern region of the section contains the continuation of the land of the Comas, which lies on the shore of a portion of the Black Sea in the sixth section of the sixth zone. It reaches the lake of Trmy 208 in this section. This is a freshwater lake into which drain many rivers from the mountains south and north of it. In the northeast of this section is the land of the Abaraya 209 Turks, which extends to the boundary of the section. The sixth section of the seventh zone contains in the southwest the continuation of the land of the Comas. In the middle of that region is Lake Ghnwn 210. This is a freshwater lake into which drain the rivers from the mountains in the regions east of it. It is constantly frozen because of the severe cold, except for a short while during the summer. East of the country of the Comas is the country of Russia, which started in the northeast of the fifth section of the sixth zone. In the southeast corner of this, the sixth section, is the remainder of the land of the Bulgars, Bulfa, that started in the northeastern part of the sixth section of the sixth zone. In the middle of this portion of the land of the Bulgars, there is the point where the Volga makes its first turn to the south, as has been mentioned. The Kafaya Mountains stretch all along the northern boundary of the sixth section from the west to the east. The seventh section of the seventh zone, in the west, contains the remainder of the land of the Pechegs, a Turkish nation. Beginning in the northeastern part of the preceding sixth and southwest of this section, it then, in the south, enters the sixth zone. In the east, there is the remainder of the land of the Bashkirs, followed by the remainder of the Stinking Land, which extends to the eastern boundary of the section. The northern boundary of the section is formed by the surrounding Kafaya Mountains stretching, all along it, from the west to the east. The eighth section of the seventh zone contains in the southwest the continuation of the Stinking Land. East of it is the sunken 211 land, a remarkable place. It is an immense opening in the earth, so deep that the bottom cannot be reached. The appearance of smoke during the day and of fire at night, which by turns flares up and disappears, leads to the conclusion that the place is inhabited. A river is occasionally seen there. It cuts through it from south to north. In the east of this section is the waste country, which borders the dam. Across the northern limit of the section are the Kafaya Mountains, stretching all along it from the west to the east. The ninth section of the seventh zone contains in the west the country of the Kipchak, that is, the Kyipchaks. It is traversed by the Kafaya Mountains, where they turn away from the north of the section at the surrounding sea and run southeast through the middle of the section. They then leave this zone for the 9th section of the 6th zone and pass across it. There, in the middle of them, is the dam of Gog and Magog, which we have already mentioned. The eastern part of this section contains the land of Magog, behind the Kafaya Mountains, on the sea. It 211 is not very wide and is oblong in shape and surrounds it in the east and north. The 10th section of the 7th zone is entirely covered by the sea. This finishes the discussion of the world map with the 7 zones. In the creation of heaven and earth and the difference between night and day, there are signs for those who know 212. Third prefatory discussion. The temperate and the intemperate zones. The use of the air upon the color of human beings and upon many other aspects of their condition. We 213 have explained that the cultivated region of that part of the earth which is not covered by water has its center toward the north, because of the excessive heat in the south and the excessive cold in the north. The north and the south represent opposite extremes of cold and heat. It necessarily follows that there must be a gradual decrease from the extremes toward the center, which, thus, is moderate. The 4th zone is the most temperate cultivated region. The bordering 3rd and 5th zones are rather close to being temperate. The 6th and 2nd zones which are adjacent to them are far from temperate, and the 1st and 7th zones still less so. Therefore, the sciences, the crafts, the buildings, the clothing, the foodstuffs, the fruits, even the animals, and everything that comes into being in the 3 middle zones are distinguished by their temperate, well-proportioned character. The human inhabitants of these zones are more temperate, well-proportioned, in their bodies, color, character qualities, and general conditions. 214 They are found to be extremely moderate in their dwellings, clothing, foodstuffs, and crafts. They use houses that are well constructed of stone and embellished by craftsmanship. They rival each other in production of the very best tools and implements. Among them, one finds the natural minerals, such as gold, silver, iron, copper, lead, and tin. In their business dealings they use the 2 precious metals, gold and silver. They avoid intemperance quite generally in all their conditions. Such are the inhabitants of the Maghrib, of Syria, the 2 Iraqs, Western India, as Sid, and China, as well as of Spain, also the European Christians nearby, the Galicians, 215 and all those who live together with these peoples or near them in the 3 temperate zones. The Iraq and Syria are directly in the middle and therefore are the most temperate of all these countries. The inhabitants of the zones that are far from temperate, such as the 1st, 2nd, 6th, and 7th zones, are also farther removed from being temperate in all their conditions. Their buildings are of clay and reeds. Their foodstuffs are dura and herbs. Their clothing is the leaves of trees, which they sew together to cover themselves, or animal skins. Most of them go naked. The fruits and seasonings of their countries are strange and inclined to be intemperate. In their business dealings, they do not use the 2 noble metals, but copper, iron, or skins, upon which they set a value for the purpose of business dealings. Their qualities of character, moreover, are close to those of dumb animals. It has even been reported that most of the Negroes of the 1st zone dwell in caves and thickets, eat herbs, live in savage isolation and do not congregate, and eat each other. 216 The same applies to the Slavs. The reason for this is that their remoteness from being temperate produces in them a disposition and character similar to those of the dumb animals, and they become correspondingly remote from humanity. The same also applies to their religious conditions. They are ignorant of prophecy and do not have a religious law, except for the small minority that lives near the temperate regions. This minority includes, for instance, the Abyssinians, who are neighbors of the Yemites and have been Christians from pre-Islamic and Islamic times down to the present, and the Mali, the Gaygor, and the Takra who live close to the Maghrib and, at this time, are Muslims. They are said to have adopted Islam in the 7th, 13th century. Or, in the north, there are those Slav, European Christian, and Turkish nations that have adopted Christianity. All the other inhabitants of the intemperate zones in the south and in the north are ignorant of all religion. Religious scholarship is lacking among them. All their conditions are remote from those of human beings and close to those of wild animals. And he creates what you do not know. 217. The foregoing statement is not contradicted by the existence of the Yemen, the Hadramaut, Al-Aqaf, the Hijaz, the Yamimor, and adjacent regions of the Arabian Peninsula in the first and second zones. As we have mentioned, 218 The Arabian Peninsula is surrounded by the sea on three sides. The humidity of the sea influences the humidity in the air of the Arabian Peninsula. This diminishes the dryness and intemperance that, otherwise, the heat would cause. Because of the humidity from the sea, the Arabian Peninsula is to some degree temperate. Genealogists who had no knowledge of the true nature of things imagined that Negroes are the children of Ham, the son of Noah, and that they were singled out to be black as the result of Noah's curse, which produced Ham's color and the slavery God inflicted upon his descendants. It is mentioned in the Torah 219 that Noah cursed his son Ham. No reference is made there to blackness. The curse included no more than that Ham's descendants should be the slaves of his brother's descendants. To attribute the blackness of the Negroes to Ham, reveals disregard of the true nature of heat and cold and of the influence they exercise upon the air, climate, and upon the creatures that come into being in it. The black color of skin, common to the inhabitants of the first and second zones, is the result of the composition of the air in which they live, and which comes about under the influence of the greatly increased heat in the south. The sun is at the zenith there twice a year at short intervals. In almost all seasons, the sun is in culmination for a long time. The light of the sun, therefore, is plentiful. 220 people there have to undergo a very severe summer, and their skins turn black because of the excessive heat. Something similar happens in the two corresponding zones to the north, the 7th and 6th zones. There, a white color of skin is common among the inhabitants, likewise the result of the composition of the air in which they live, and which comes about under the influence of the excessive cold in the north. The sun is always on the horizon within the visual field of the human observer, or close to it. It never ascends to the zenith, nor even gets close to it. The heat, therefore, is weak in this region, and the cold severe in almost all seasons. In consequence, the color of the inhabitants is white, and they tend to have little body hair. Further consequences of the excessive cold are blue eyes, freckled skin, and blonde hair. The 5th, 4th, and 3rd zones occupy an intermediate position. They have an abundant share of temperance 221, which is the golden mean. The 4th zone, being the one most nearly in the center, is as temperate as can be. We have mentioned that before 222 the physique and character of its inhabitants are temperate to the high degree necessitated by the composition of the air in which they live. The 3rd and 5th zones lie on either side of the 4th, but they are less centrally located. They are closer to the hot south beyond the 3rd zone and the cold north beyond the 5th zone. However, they do not become intemperate. The 4 other zones are intemperate, and the physique and character of their inhabitants show it. The 1st and 2nd zones are excessively hot and black, and the 6th and 7th zones cold and white. The inhabitants of the 1st and 2nd zones in the south are called the Abyssinians, the Zaj, and the Sudanese, Negroes. These are synonyms used to designate the particular nation that has turned black. The name Abyssinians, however, is restricted to those Negroes who live opposite Mecca and the Yemen, and the name Zaj is restricted to those who live along the Indian Sea. These names are not given to them because of an alleged descent from a black human being, be it Ham or anyone else. Negroes from the south who settle in the temperate 4th zone or in the 7th zone that tends toward whiteness, are found to produce descendants whose color gradually turns white in the course of time. Vice versa, inhabitants from the north or from the 4th zone who settle in the south produce descendants whose color turns black. This shows that color is conditioned by the composition of the air. In his Rajaz poem on medicine, a vizier said, "Where the Zaj live is a heat that changes their bodies until their skins are covered all over with black. The Slavs acquire whiteness until their skins turn soft." 223. The inhabitants of the north are not called by their color, because the people who established the conventional meanings of words were themselves white. Thus, whiteness was something usual and common to them, and they did not see anything sufficiently remarkable in it to cause them to use it as a specific term. Therefore, the inhabitants of the north, the Turks, the Slavs, the Tuguzhas, 224, the Khazars, the Alas, most of the European Christians, the Gog and Magog are found to be separate nations 225 and numerous races called by a variety of names. The inhabitants of the middle zones are temperate in their physique and character and in their ways of life. They have all the natural conditions necessary for a civilized life, such as ways of making a living, dwellings, crafts, sciences, political leadership, and royal authority. They thus have had various manifestations of prophecy, religious groups, dynasties, religious laws, sciences, countries, cities, buildings, horticulture, splendid crafts, and everything else that is temperate. Now, among the inhabitants of these zones about whom we have historical information are, for instance, the Arabs, the Byzantines, Rum, the Persians, the Israelites, the Greeks, the Indians, and the Chinese. When 226 genealogists noted differences between these nations, their distinguishing marks and characteristics, they considered these to be due to their different descents. They declared all the Negro inhabitants of the South to be descendants of Ham. They had misgivings about their color and therefore undertook to report the aforementioned silly story. They declared all or most of the inhabitants of the North to be the descendants of Japheth, and they declared most of the temperate nations, who inhabit the central regions, who cultivate the sciences and crafts, and who possess religious groups and religious laws as well as political leadership and royal authority, to be the descendants of Shem. Even if the genealogical construction were correct, it would be the result of mere guesswork, not of cogent, logical argumentation. It would merely be a statement of fact. It would not imply that the inhabitants of the South are called Abyssinians and Negroes because they are descended from Black Ham. The genealogists were led into this error by their belief that the only reason for differences between nations is in their descent. This is not so. Distinctions between races or nations are in some cases due to a different descent, as in the case of the Arabs, the Israelites, and the Persians. In other cases, they are caused by geographical location and physical marks, as in the case of the Zaj, Negroes, the Abyssinians, the Slavs, and the Black, Sudanese, Negroes. Again, in other cases, they are caused by custom and distinguishing characteristics, as well as by descent, as in the case of the Arabs. Or, they may be caused by anything else among the conditions, qualities, and features peculiar to the different nations. But to generalize and say that the inhabitants of a specific geographical location in the south or in the north are the descendants of such and such a well-known person because they have a common color, trait, or physical mark which that alleged forefather had, is one of those errors which are caused by disregard, both of the true nature of created beings and of geographical facts. There also is disregard of the fact that the physical circumstances and environment are subject to changes that affect later generations. They do not necessarily remain unchanged. This is how God proceeds with his servants. And verily, you will not be able to change God's way. 227.